Will you follow me when the sky starts to change? Yeah, we won't be afraid. We'll never be the same again.
You're streaming with the Fantasy Follow. Week 4 is in the books. We got your recap of all the weekend's action here tonight, and it starts right now. It's a big day of football. You can do this. Make those good decisions. There's never a better time than this week. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Follow. This is the TFF Live Monday Postgame show. We're with you here tonight to give you a recap of your fantasy football action from over the weekend. A lot of great games to talk about. Hope you all enjoyed the Monday night game tonight. It was a LA Chargers win tonight, 28-14 over Las Vegas. Decent game, especially for those of you who needed some nice points out of some particular players. Justin Herbert had a decent night, but Austin Eckler, a very nice night tonight, 29.50 fantasy points for the Chargers, 117 yards rushing with a touchdown, adding a touchdown through the air as well, and his 3 catches there for another 28 yards. Austin Eckler proving to be a very nice choice for your team this week in week 4 and hopefully throughout the rest of this season moving forward. Keenan Allen led the way for the Chargers receivers with 10.6 on his 12 targets. Disappointing game for Mike Williams, who has been awesome so far this year. Only 4 targets for Williams. It looks like the Raiders pretty much decided that Williams wasn't going to beat them, but they got beaten nonetheless. 2.1 for Williams this week. Jared Cook played well at the tight end spot, a player that we've been kind of keeping an eye on. Potentially be able to help your team. Probably still available on your waiver wires, but nonetheless, 19.00 for Cook tonight. 7 targets, 6 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown. On the Vegas side of the ball, Josh Jacobs was able to get back into action this week. 14 rushes, also 5 catches on all 5 of his targets, and it was a 10.80 night for Jacobs. Fantasy-wise, not a lot else to speak of on this team. Hunter Renfrow, nice night, 16.5. Darren Waller, of course, is always going to be there. 8 targets, 50 yards with a touchdown, 15.0. Carr with 15.44 on his night. But this was a good night for the Chargers and a good win there for them out west. The game that was delayed a little bit. So hope all of you enjoyed that game out there. And as well, we are going to be able to review all the rest of the action throughout all of your weekend games. Most importantly, if you are on our live stream tonight, feel free to join us in the live chat. That is what we are here for. And that is always what we love to do. We have plenty of content that we'll go through tonight, but as always, we would much rather be talking with you than just talking to you. So feel free to jump in the live chat. In the meantime, we will get started with the Week 4 recap. We'll go through game by game, and we will start out as I get my computer set up here. Here we go. First game by game recap we got online for you here is going to be the New York Giants and the New Orleans Saints. This game in New Orleans, and it was the Giants getting the win there, 27-21. So a nice win. Not hasn't been a great season so far for the Giants, but a nice win nonetheless. And as I struggle with my other screen to get information, hey, look at that, we got it. Giants win that game. Talking about fantasy-wise, Daniel Jones, another nice night, another nice day at quarterback for Daniel Jones, 27.74. 401 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, adding a couple 27 yards on the ground, so a couple yards on the ground as well. But a real nice night for Daniel Jones, a streamable quarterback, it looks like, at this point in the season. Kenny Golladay finally gets involved there for the Giants. About time, 17.60 on the day for Golladay. They didn't have much choice without Sterling Shepard, without Darius Slayton. Kind of what we said on some earlier live streams was if this wasn't the week that Golladay had a good game, then we were really in trouble for those of us that have Golladay on some teams. And fortunately, they did actually use him some this week, so that was kind of nice to see. Kadarius Toney, the rookie, was in there 13-9. Golladay was 8 targets, and Toney was 10 targets. So Toney still saw more targets than Golladay, but Golladay was able to put up the numbers with 116 yards in receiving. Also, John Ross, who was added to the team recently for the Giants, caught a big touchdown there. 4 targets, 3 catches, 11-6. Of course, Saquon Barkley back in there and looking good at this point. 52 yards on the ground with a touchdown. 5 catches on 6 targets for 74 through the air and a touchdown there as well. So hopefully you are feeling good about Saquon working the way back in there for the Giants. And Evan Ingram is back. 7.4 for Ingram. That's for those of you that are regulars. You know why I say that already. No need to explain. 7 targets, 5 catches, 27 yards for Ingram. On the New Orleans side, really not much you can really work off of here. Alvin Kamara with a lot of work, but not a ton of production. 120 yards on the ground, no touchdowns. So just those 12 fantasy points. Jameis Winston is the guy that I have on the board here at 13-4. He actually was not the highest scoring quarterback for New Orleans, but I listed Winston on the graphics simply because he's probably the guy. If anybody's playing a quarterback from New Orleans, he's probably the guy. It was Taysom Hill who actually had the most fantasy points of all the quarterbacks there. 18th, all of them. I say like there's a ton of them. 18.76 for Taysom Hill. Just 2 for 3 on passing, but of course, the run game for Taysom, he had 6 attempts, 28 yards, 2 touchdowns. Even caught 2 targets, 2 catches on 2 targets. Winston just 18 of 24, 236 with a touchdown there. And then as you look around, Juwan Johnson, a decent game at the tight end spot, but other than that, really not much to speak of from anybody else on that roster. Deontay Harris with 10-2, the leading receiver among the receiver core. So the Giants win that game 27-21. I see an early chat here, so I'm going to jump back out of the screen and go ahead and get over to the chats. And let's see what we got here. We always try to get those. This is from Slide, one of our regulars. Welcome back, Slide. Glad to have you on the stream tonight. You say, really considering using my waiver pick on John Ross this week. 16-man league, so I really have to prioritize, but I think he'll get a decent amount of targets in the future. If you're playing in that deep of a league, then yeah, I do think that there's we've seen the thing with the Giants is that it's been so spread around there. It's kind of hard to know exactly what to expect in the future. Going into the season, I would have thought that when you're bringing a guy like Golladay, you're going to use him a lot more. It doesn't seem like they really have. As the injuries continue, if this is a week where it looks like you're still not going to have a Shepard, you're still not going to have a Slayton, then Ross's value obviously is even more so because of that. So at the very least, keep an eye on your reports, and you might get a good start out there with some decent volume, and then when those players come back, it could change. But certainly a player that you might be able to find some value in a deep league like that. So I don't blame you at all, Slide, for looking that direction. I think some good possibilities there. Thank you for the chat. Glad to have you with us again. For those of you watching, I'll again remind you guys, put the reminder up as we go through our other content that the live chat will stay open the entire show. So feel free to drop us a chat. Also, if you're watching on replay, feel free to leave your comments below. We'd love to hear from you there. Give us your thoughts on any of the games or any of the players as you continue your season. We got another chat here from JAC. Welcome, JAC. Looks like you might be a new viewer. And if you are, welcome to the stream. You say, I got a trade offer where I see D-Hop and trade away Amari Cooper and Cordero Patterson. Should I accept? My 2 running backs are Cook and Carson. Other 2 receivers are Terry McLaurin and Justin Jefferson. This is close to me. I mean, Hopkins is an interesting situation right now because we've seen a couple of weeks that have been a little less than we reasonably expect for him. Is that a trend or is that just a couple of week thing? The situation there is one to monitor because of the fact that I personally didn't expect AJ Green to be much of a factor in that offense, but he is showing himself just a little bit there, which gives you a lot of mouths to feed now in that offense. So is it possible that, is this a downturn for Hopkins? You wouldn't expect that from a player as good as he is in an offense that's going to throw the ball that much. I have him on a couple of rosters. I don't think that I'm all that concerned about it. But that being said, if you're trading away right now, this is an offer being made to you. So this is potentially looks like someone's trying to buy low on Hopkins, given the fact that you might be unsure about him right now. Cooper's been pretty good, and Cordero Patterson really seems like he is kind of a thing there in Atlanta at this point. So you are giving up a lot of value in those two. Now, that being said, you have the depth. You have good players in both of your spots. So you're looking to you would end up. I'm sorry, I said this was a buy low. No, you've been offered. They're trying to get Cooper and Patterson and give you Hopkins. I should say that the right way. Yeah, I think that you potentially are in. You've got a stellar receiver core. Not that you didn't already have a good one, but you're going to have Hopkins, McLaurin, and Jefferson. And Cook and Carson are already going to be there. I don't know how I feel about what happened with the situation in Seattle this week in terms of Carson and Alex Collins seeming to get as much play as he did. I don't know what's going on there. Something to continue to watch. But I definitely think that if you value a Hopkins in this situation, I think you could make this deal. I do think you're giving away a lot of volume. I might consider asking for a second piece back with Hopkins, even if it's not a big piece, something just to maintain a little bit of your depth there, perhaps a flex running back from the other team or even a bench running back from the other team. Because obviously Hopkins for Cooper would be considered an upgrade. So I think if you added in so I can see obviously I don't know the rosters, but if the person who's making this offer has a lower down running back available, that would be, a downgrade from Patterson, that might even this out a little bit. It does seem like you're giving away a lot of volume from two players who are playing pretty well at this point. So that's going to be a personal kind of choice on your part. Slide says no. I see a jumping in from, and I don't, by all means, you guys jump in. Slide says no. I guess kind of that's why you're hearing, or what you're saying, Slide, is kind of the same thing that you're hearing from the way I'm like, I didn't jump in and say immediately, yes, go ahead and do this. I don't think you can't do this, but I think you might want to consider getting back something along with Hopkins if you are going to try to make this deal, just to protect your depth. And I would think it's running back because of the fact that what happens if the Carson thing in Seattle is some sort of a trend there, and all of a sudden you are down one running back. So I would think about adding potentially if you are going to try to make that trade. Either way, JAC, glad to have you on the stream. Hope a little bit of that helped out here. And stop back and let us know what you decide to do with that there. All right, we got another chat here from King Lucky King. Also looks like a new viewer, so welcome to the stream, King Lucky King. You're asking Saquon Barkley for Dalvin Cook. I would understand. I would want to know if you're saying you are trading away Barkley and trying to get Dalvin Cook. I'm going to take it that way, but if it's not that, then tell me if I'm looking at it the other way. Do I think you want to trade away Saquon at this point for Cook? I don't know if I would feel that way right now. Not at the moment, with the fact that there's been some injury concerns with Cook, and in the first week back from injury this week, it didn't look like they were willing to give him a full workload. So I'm not sure that they're 100% on where he is at this point. And Barkley looks like he's on his way back here. If you were going to make this, this is going to sound like a lot like the last one. If you were going to try to make that deal, then I might think that you need to add something on the Cook side to get us a little bit something more back, because I think that of the two right now, Dalvin Cook is a great player, but Barkley is on the way up at this point, and I don't know if I can say the same thing about Cook right now. I think he'll be fine, but at this point in the season, now if this were 2 weeks ago, it would be completely different, but at this very point in the season, I would say, which one of these two guys do you feel more hesitant about? And it's probably Cook. Now, he's probably going to be fine. But at this very point to make that trade, I think that you're looking at a guy, Barkley, who is clearly returning to form. And I think that I might want to stick with that. And also the situation in New York right now is they are going to need him far more than Minnesota needs Cook. Minnesota can win games with a Jefferson, with a Thielen, with the guys that they have there. The Giants, can they win games with their receiver core? They definitely need Barkley at this point. So I have a feeling that you're going to see him used a lot and continue to receive a lot of volume, whereas if Minnesota needs to go a different direction from time to time, they can. So I don't dislike Cook at all. Don't take it that way. I think Cook is a top player, and he's going to end up being a top player at the end of the year. But I think right now, I think Barkley might be worth holding on to. I do see a follow-up here, and you say keep Barkley. And I'm wondering if that's what you're thinking about, that you should keep him. I think that's I would kind of be thinking that same way right now. Now, it changes, like I said. If you get another piece along with Cook, if you want to make it a two players on each side and get an upgrade at another spot, whatever the case may be, then that's a possibility. But as a 1-for-1 here, I kind of feel like the Barkley side of this is the better side. So if it's you that have Barkley now and are considering trading away, I feel like the Barkley side might be the better side of this trade right now. So consider that as you decide on whether or not to make that deal. Hope that helped you out there, King Lucky King. And glad to have you on with the Fantasy Follow tonight. Slide, you got a chat here that says, true, looking at Randall Cobb. You're talking about your original one here about Ross. Looking at Cobb, Raymond, Freddie Swain. Got to do something now that he lost Chark. That is too bad with the injury there to Chark. Of the other guys that you mentioned there, I don't know. Compared to Ross, I don't know where these guys would fall. I think that Raymond, the situation in Detroit, it's going to be a revolving door from those receivers. I think the only guy that you really trust week in and week out in that pass game is Hawkinson. I think it's going to be a different guy every week. Freddie Swain, I don't expect to be an every week factor there for Seattle. I think that Randall Cobb potentially has a little bit of value there, but you're not going to see him lead the team every week like he did this week. And neither is John Ross. You're talking about a deep league here. So either any one of those guys, are they at the level of Chark? Probably not, but had we been seeing what we wanted to see from Chark this year? Not necessarily either. So it's kind of a little bit of a toss-up on those. I might, if this is a PPR league, Slide, I might think that Randall Cobb has the potential to catch the most passes out of all the guys you're talking about, and that might make the difference. And even if he doesn't put up big games, that you might just see the PPR value out of Cobb more than Ross. Ross is going to be a big play guy. I don't expect him to be a guy that they're going to target a ton. And the other guys I just feel like it's going to be too much of a revolving door. So if it's a standard league, then you might be looking for the big playability. That might make the difference there. But if it's a PPR league, I would consider Cobb, and I would take a look at where he's at in that offense. And here's what we'll do, Slide. I will go into the review next, and I'm going to talk about I'm going to talk about the Green Bay game next, and hopefully that'll help you some on that decision here. It wasn't the order that I had originally wanted to go here, but this is why we do this. There's purpose to this now, so let's talk about the Pittsburgh-Green Bay recap. Green Bay wins this game 27-17. Again, thank you guys all for the chat, and feel free to jump in with chat anytime as we're going through the content. This is what we kind of do. We jump around, and we enjoy talking fantasy football with all of you guys. So we do have plenty of content, but we always want to get back to your chats as soon as we can. So taking a look at this game, speaking specifically about Cobb, obviously the fantasy leader in terms of pass catchers there for Green Bay, 23.90, 6 targets, 5 catches, 2 touchdowns there. Devontae Adams did lead the team in targets, as you would expect. 6 catches on 11 targets for 64 yards, 12.40 in terms of points. But Cobb was second in targets on that team. He was third behind actually Robert Tonyan, who did not do much in this game. Robert Tonyan is a player that you've got to be a little bit concerned about right now if you drafted him. I know I have him in a couple of spots, and I started to look around to try to figure out other options there. I figured that most players are doing that at this point. But yeah, in terms of his usage in the offense there, I would think that Cobb is a player to keep an eye on. I don't have his numbers up on my screen for the entire year at this point. But just in terms of, let me go ahead and see if I can pull that up as well. Open it up on another screen here, because I would like to see what he did in those other games, just to kind of give you a little bit more of an idea. So let me call that up. Shouldn't take but a minute here. Let's see here, Randall Cobb. Let's see how far down the list he is overall. Cobb is 52nd on the list right now, wide receiver 52 overall for the season. Overall for the year, 11 targets. So clearly if he had 6 this game, has not been worked into that offense very much at all up until this week. Only he had more targets in this game against Pittsburgh than he had in his other 3 games combined. 1 the first week, 3 the second week, and 1 the third week. I might everything that I said before, about that. But a player to keep an eye on, perhaps. Does his performance in week 5 kind of change that a little bit? It's possible. But in terms of where they're at right now on the board, he is not. He's behind Swain. Swain is 46 for the year. He is behind who are the other guys you said? Raymond is 33 for the year. Let me call up Raymond's numbers just to see what the targets have looked like for him. 4 in week 1, 2 in week 2, 10 in week 3, and 6 in week 4. Fantasy points, and this is I'm actually standard. Let me switch it over to PPR. So in terms of a PPR scoring, 9, 4, 13, and 20 for Raymond. For Detroit, perhaps, that situation in Detroit, none of these guys are going to be known as much, but perhaps that might not be a bad thought there in terms of where he's at right now. It seems like he might be a little bit farther ahead in that offense than at least Cobb and for sure Ross, who's only a recent acquisition there for the Giants. So I don't think the Raymond thought is all that bad of an idea either. Either way, Slide, let us know how that works out. And hopefully you find the guy that ends up hitting for you there in a deep league. It's always tough, but certainly some potential there. We will go through the rest of this game, and I do see another chat. I'll get back to that. Look at the Pittsburgh side of this game. Of course, the Pittsburgh offense looks like it's sputtering a little bit. Roethlisberger with 40 attempts in this game, 1 touchdown. That number is not correct for Roethlisberger, so it looks like my graphic is not going to be correct here. I will give you the correct numbers. I must have gotten that mixed up when I put these up here. The Green Bay side numbers are correct, but those fantasy totals on the Pittsburgh side are not correct. Roethlisberger was 10.28. Deontay Johnson was the leader, but he was 24.20. Just disregard the numbers you see there. 14 targets for Johnson, 9 catches, 92 yards, and a touchdown. Washington second at 10.90. Juju next at 3.10. And the running backs, Harris with 21.10. That was 62 yards on the ground with a touchdown, 7 targets, 6 catches, 29 yards there. Snell with 0. And then Eric Ebron was the highest tight end at 2.8. So that was the rundown of those players. Obviously, that graphic did not get correctly updated. Let's hope that's the last time that happens in this show. We never like to see that. But at least the Green Bay side was correct, especially since that's what we were looking at there. So, all right, let me back out here, and I'll get back over to the – see, I did that again. I got to do it this direction. There we go. Jump back over to the chat and see what that last chat was there from you, Slide. It says, yes, it's 5 half-point PPR. We're on the same page, though. Thanks for your input. And as I always say, thank you for being here on the stream. Of course, like I always say, you guys make the show by being here with your questions. So any of you that are on the stream tonight, feel free, and we will jump back to those as much as we can. All right, let's keep going through the Week 4 recap. Let's see if I've managed to actually put right numbers on most of my graphics tonight. Let's hope it doesn't. There are times when these things happen. Hopefully this isn't one of them. The next game up on the line here is going to be Kansas City and Philadelphia. And we'll take a look at the rundown for that game. This was a very nice game for Jalen Hurts. And Patrick Mahomes is always going to be in play with nice games, so no surprise there. But as we look at these numbers, Mahomes, 32-7-6, 270 yards with a big 5 touchdowns there. Tyreek Hill, of course, if you played Tyreek Hill against him this week, you probably didn't have that go all too well for you. If you have Tyreek Hill on your team, congratulations on your W. 12 targets, 11 catches, 186, 3 touchdowns, 47.60, just crushing it as always. Clyde Edwards-Helaire got in there with a little bit of help this week, 19-4, 102 yards on the ground. Also had a touchdown catch as well. And Travis Kelce at 6.3, 4 catches for 23 yards. Obviously, last week we saw Hill with a little bit less of a day. So, these things sometimes happen where one of them hits it and the other one doesn't. Of course, it's a high-powered offense, but still, when one of your players is at 47-6, they can't all crush them that good. So a little bit of a down day for Kelce if you have him on your roster. On the Philadelphia side, Jalen Hurts continues to impress fantasy-wise. 387 yards passing in this game, 2 touchdowns. We liked his matchup going into this week and he got you a nice number. Devontae Smith did as well. 10 targets, 7 catches, 122. That was 19-2 as the total there. Again, as you're looking at these graphics, the other thing I should point out, I didn't want to point it on the last graphic because the stuff was wrong, so I just kind of wanted to look away. But on this one, I will point it out. On each of these rundowns, you will see next to their name, if you see the yellow W, that means that those players are rostered in less than 50% of all leagues at this point. So we kind of add that to you there, being that it's Monday and people are starting to think about their waivers for the week. That is something you can look to if there are players that you might not have realized might be on or should be on your radar in terms of potentials somewhere down the road this season. So we kind of add that to these graphics to kind of give you a little bit of extra information there. Again, at the running back spot, Kenneth Gainwell, 20.90, 8 targets, 6 catches, 58 yards, had a touchdown on the ground as well. Miles Sanders only 7.7. What do we think is going on there? Because, my light went off in the background. That's good. Well, we're going to have no light in the background for the rest of this show. That's all right. We've done it before. Where was I? Yeah, Gainwell, earlier in the year, we saw him kind of be something, and then all of a sudden, well, is he not something? But where do we stand on Kenneth Gainwell at this point? Is this a player that you should be keeping on your roster? I don't know how you would determine when you were going to play him at all at this point, but something to keep an eye on. Not too sure why the big switch, unless they're just considering going with a hot hand situation there in Philadelphia this year. So for those of you that have Miles Sanders and drafted him fairly high, something to be a little bit concerned about probably, but we'll keep an eye on it. Dallas Goedert with a very nice day, 6 catches on his 6 targets, 2 touchdowns, 62 yards, 24-2-0. So a couple of really nice games there. And then if you have Miles Sanders, you might be a little bit concerned. So a lot of stuff to look at in that game. And we'll jump back over to the chat at this point. So let's see. I see a couple of alerts here. Let me see what we got next here. From JAZ, you say, okay, thanks. I just think Amari Cooper isn't 100% healthy. Ribs and ankles seems dependent on long touchdowns with Lamb. Could be. Tight end's taking a lot of targets. Don't mind selling high on Patterson. If that's the case, then yeah, I could see where this makes some sense here. You follow up with that saying, but yeah, I'm reluctant to accept because Max Williams, Kirk, and Rondell Moore are taking a lot of targets. I can't say that I think that I'm worried about Hopkins because he's too good of a player to feel like I'm worried about him. But at the same time, I would have thought you would have seen more this week after a down game from him. So yeah, it's hard to say. But I appreciate the question. And obviously, like I always say, you guys know the rosters as well as anybody. So ultimately, some of these decisions can be tough. And this might be one of those for you, whether or not you decide to go that way or not. But I could see reasons on both sides. So hopefully, whichever way you go, it turns out well for you, and it keeps going well with the wins throughout the season. So JAC, I wish you the best on that, and appreciate the question. Glad to have you on the stream. We got one of our regulars here tonight, Vansco. Welcome to the stream, Vansco. You say, oh boy, imagine losing because you started Allen Robinson instead of Marquise Brown. That could never happen. Oh, Vansco. I actually, when I saw the touchdown that Brown caught, I remembered the fact that you had made a comment on one of the previous live streams about how when Marquise Brown caught a 90-yard touchdown, you were going to be sitting there saying, oh, why didn't I start him? And I know we talked a lot about that. So, yeah, I was hoping that you might have still were able to get that win, even despite that happening. But yeah, Allen Robinson not so good, and Marquise Brown got him. So like I always say, there's decisions to be made out there, and it's sometimes they go your way and sometimes they don't. So that is unfortunate that ended up costing you there, but it's information to continue to use as the season goes forward, and I know that you'll do that as you move on from this one. So sorry to hear about the loss there, but you're gonna be able to turn that around. Not a problem. Welcome back as well, Vansco. All right, I'm going to get back to the rest of the content. Before I do that, let me put this notification up again, let you know that the live chat is open for all the show, as you already know. Jump in with your chat anytime, even if we're going through other stuff. We'll get back to your chats just as we've been doing. All right, let's go ahead and go back over to the rest of the recap. We'll look at the next game in order, and that is going to be Houston and my Buffalo Bills. Houston, tough to get any fantasy production when you score 0 But I was a little bit concerned with the Houston production in this game, because it does look like Buffalo's defense has improved this year. And as I always say, I am up here in Buffalo, so I am Bills Mafia, but fantasy football is completely different to me than rooting interest. So I'm not trying to confuse the two at all. 40-0, the Buffalo game there. On the Houston side of things, probably if we start at the quarterback, and when you see a negative number, you probably don't need to go much further with analyzing the rest of the roster, because I doubt there's going to be much else going on there because of that. So Brandon Cooks did still manage to get 9-7 out of that on 8 targets, 5 catches, 47 yards. On the Buffalo side of things, no surprise, Stephon Diggs back to the top of the leaders for the receivers there for Diggs. 10 targets, 7 catches, 114, even in a game where they not really need to pass the ball all that much because of such a big lead. He was still able to get a decent day out there. Josh Allen with 21-0-2. Good to see Emmanuel Sanders gave you some production if you went out and got him on the waiver wire this past week, 13-1. And, at least maintained his spot in that offense ahead of Cole Beasley this week. Beasley just with 2 targets. So perhaps we're seeing Sanders start to work his way into that offense even a little bit more. And we also saw the run game for Buffalo. Obviously, when you're up that big, that's going to be a game script. But Zach Moss did have a nice day, 12-1, got a touchdown there. And Singletary without a touchdown, 9-6, so a decent day there as well. And then, of course, at the tight end spot, we talked about Dawson Knox a lot this past week. We liked his matchup there as somebody that you could have streamed, and it worked out well if you did do that. 8 targets, 5 catches, 37 yards, 2 touchdowns, 20.72. It'll be interesting to see if Knox continues in that offense all year long, or if that was just a couple of games stretch here where it's been good. Obviously, it was a really good matchup, the tight end spot for Knox. So we will keep an eye on him as we go through the rest of the season. But nonetheless, some decent production there from the Bills side of that. All right, let's go ahead and jump back to the chat here. We will get our next couple in line here and see what we got. Let me scroll down. We got Rob Navarro, one of our regulars here. Welcome back, Rob. You say, who do you like better rest of the season in the PPR league, Sam Darnold or Ryan Tannehill? Right now, Sam Darnold is a guy that I started looking around on waiver wires at this point. You have to start to think that this is a player that could potentially help you. Tannehill, without A.J. Brown and without Julio Jones, of course it was going to be difficult, but it has been, I don't know if slow start is the right way to describe it anymore, because to me, 4 games in now, slow start would have been what the actual start was. And for things to still kind of not be going the way you want to, if you're relying on Ryan Tannehill as your starter, then I think it's very reasonable to look around. Carolina is playing well, and they have weapons. And Sam Darnold, it seems very willing to run the ball as well. So it does not surprise me if in past years, as like last year on this stream, of all the times that I talked about the New York Jets under Adam Gase, how many players have we seen that have not played well when coached by Adam Gase and then all of a sudden have gone on and been very productive? Are we starting to think that Sam Darnold falls into that category at this point? I think it's very possible. It's just, I don't think you're wrong at all, Rob, to be thinking about doing this. At the very least, I think if you've got spots available, if you've got a bench that has a place to put Darnold, I think you might bring Darnold on right now if you can. Keep Tannehill for now, and then make a decision. You can at least make a matchup play if you want to, who you're going to start. And then at some point you have the option, to think about what you want to do with Tannehill. If you want to keep them both, if you want to try to make a trade that involves Tannehill somehow, you have some choices there. So yeah, I think if you have some depth on your bench, I think it's very reasonable to get Darnold now if you can, and then keep an eye. The way it's going right now, you have to think that there is a chance that he's got more value for you than Ryan Tannehill is giving you right now. This is the offense in Tennessee, is not what we want to see. So I see a couple of follow-ups here. JAC says, I wouldn't panic on Tannehill. Finished QB7 last year, sat Darnold in short term, and Tannehill when receivers are healthy. I don't think I'm necessarily panicking on Tannehill, but at the same time, you definitely want to protect yourself at this point. And when you see a player out there who's playing as well as Darnold has, then I think there's some possibility there. Rob, you say I could drop Terrence Marshall for Darnold. I would, yeah. To me, that makes a ton of sense. Let's do this. The next game we review will be the Carolina game. So I'm going to go through these next couple of chats here, and then we will review the Carolina game next, and I will talk a little bit about those players during that game. Rob, thank you for the question, and we'll get back to that very shortly. First, we'll go through these next couple here. Vansco, it was a rough week. Lost 3 out of 4 leagues. Ooh, Gaskin and Juju are on the chopping block. I agree. Gaskin, not what we wanted to see this week. Malcolm Brown and Salvon Ahmed have moved ahead of him in terms of the usage. Not expected. I don't know if they are trying to send a message or if they at this point are feeling like they want to go a different direction there. So certainly disappointing for those of us like I did that thought there was some potential out of Myles Gaskin this year. Vansco, you will turn it around. Aaron Rodriguez, welcome to the stream. Aaron, Curtis Samuel waivers. I think it's reasonable to give him a shot. I think the good thing about Washington is that, to me, Taylor Heineke is very viable in that offense as a backup. You see far worse situations right now going on with teams that are on their backup quarterbacks than you're seeing with Heineke. You saw a great game out of Terry McLaurin. I don't think the quarterback play is what's going to keep Curtis Samuel from having value. It remains to be seen how much of that offense he is involved in. I think there's potential there because I don't know that there's really much else that they can look to in terms of the receiver core, especially now that Logan Thomas is hurt. Don't know how long of an injury that's going to be, but at least looks like he's not going to play this week. So Samuel, a guy that's working his way in with some opportunity based on who's there. Of course, J.D. McKissick is taking up some targets. Do some of those targets perhaps shift to Samuel? I think it's possible. And not have quite as much use for McKissick. It will remain to be seen there. So I think if you have the spot, again, kind of the same situation. It depends on who you have to cut to get this guy on your roster. But if you can open up a spot either through an IR, we talked about this a little bit on previous streams. If you're playing on Yahoo, make your waiver claims on Monday instead of waiting until Tuesday. And if a player was out this weekend and you have an IR spot available, you can put him on your IR spot and make your claim without moving him. If you wait until Tuesday when his designation changes back to questionable, then you're not going to be able to make a move with him in your IR spot. But Yahoo allows it if you do it now before the designation changes, and then you can pick up that extra player and then figure out what you're going to do later, which gives you more options. So again, we talked about that before. Is that the spirit of the IR rule? Probably not, but they let you do it. It's available and it's allowed, so you might as well take advantage of it. So if perhaps you've got somebody on your roster who went out this last weekend's game with an injury, you can move them to IR, frees up a free spot for a pickup, and then you're not looking at having to drop anybody to take that chance on Samuel, and then you can make your choices later on, whether it be, trading away in a 2-for-1 to open up a spot, or, getting rid of a kicker and picking up a kicker later, whatever it may be, you have options. So I would think about that, Aaron, if you are going to try for Curtis Samuel and just kind of see what happens there. Thank you for being on the stream, Aaron. Hope that helps out there, and wish you the best with that. Let me go ahead, and I decided I was going to review the Carolina game next, so let's go ahead and do that. All right, jump back over here. Carolina, let's see where we got them. They were actually next up anyway, so look at it. It's almost like we knew what was going to happen here. Carolina, Dallas. Dallas wins this game 36-28. A lot of points in this game. As we look at the players, Darnold 33-5-4. Let me see where Darnold was on the overall top 5. Darnold was number 1 quarterback this week, just ahead of Mahomes. So in terms of that alone, if he's out there still on your waiver wire, that's enough reason to go out and try and get him. DJ Moore with a great game, as I've talked about before, a very underrated receiver. Even, I've kind of overlooked DJ Moore several times in drafts. It's time to stop doing that, clearly. 31-9 for Moore, 12 targets, 8 catches, 113 yards, 2 touchdowns. Robbie Anderson got more volume this week than we've seen him getting, 11 targets in this game, 5 catches, 46 yards, 9-9. Chuba Hubbard, I had higher expectations than what he ended up turning out there. I think you'll probably get one more week out of Chuba. It does look like McCaffrey is going to attempt to practice this week, is what the reports that I've seen. I'm sure he'll want to get back as soon as possible, but I would expect to get 2 weeks out of Chuba Hubbard if you went out and used your priority on him last week, like I did in a couple of spots. So we'll see what happens this week for him. Not much else to speak of on that side of the ball. On the Dallas side of the ball, it was Dak Prescott continuing his good play. Only 188 yards, but 4 touchdowns, 29-02 for his total. Amari Cooper with only 3 targets, did have a touchdown. Injury concerns, possibly. We just talked about that a little bit. CeeDee Lamb, not a great game there, 3-3. But we saw the tight end play kind of pick it up. And, Dalton Schultz and Blake Jarwin both. My thoughts on the tight end play is that Carolina's defense looks a little bit better. And I kind of feel like in games against tougher defenses, the tight ends have opportunity for some nice games sometimes. So Schultz, 8 targets, 6 catches, 58 yards and a touchdown, 19-8. I know I've tried to pick him up in a couple of spots last week. Happy that I did that at this point. Blake Jarwin got some work as well with a touchdown there. Just had 3 targets. I think Schultz is still the main tight end there. I don't think Jarwin concerns you if you're going after Schultz. But getting back to the Darnold point, yeah, I think that if you compare what Darnold did this week to Tannehill's numbers, let me go ahead and compare the two. I'm going to call them up on the overall board just to take a look at the run of games, to hopefully give us a little bit more information. But in terms of where they fall right now, Tannehill is currently 17th for the year. And let's see, where does Darnold fall? Darnold is 5th in terms of the overall season fantasy points, ahead of a lot of guys who you might not have expected them to be ahead of when we started the season. In order this year, 19, 20, 25, 34. He has had over 300 yards passing in 3 of his 4 games. Very consistent in terms of the passing, right around the same level. And obviously, we've seen him in the ground game as well. Tannehill, let's take a look at his numbers to compare. As I said, he is 17th right now. In order, fantasy points, 15, 15, 23, and 19. It's not awful, but you hope for a little bit more, of course. Not as consistent in terms of the pass yards. 212, 347, 197, 298. We know that we have not seen what we wanted to out of their pass catchers yet. And Derrick Henry has been very good. Of course, that's going to happen. So, yeah, of course, like you mentioned, is it reasonable to think that Darnold has the potential and that there's some opportunity that he may outproduce Tannehill for the entire season? Yeah, I do think that is some potential right now. And if that is going to happen and you can get him, then it's to your advantage now. If he's gone, then it doesn't really help you out if he does outproduce Tannehill at all moving forward. So I would think, yes, if there is the potential for you to go out and get him at this point, I think it's a very reasonable thought. I may do the same thing myself. All right, let me scroll back over here, and I see a couple of chats here before I get on to the next game. Let's see here. JAC asked Rob about the other receivers. I'll let him respond to that one. Aaron Rodriguez says, when do buys start? That is a good question. Buys normally would start in week 4, and of course, I don't believe that they did. Of course, they didn't this week. So let me see if I can look that up here on my other screen. Let's go ahead and look over to week 5. And let's see what we got for games. Right. I would assume I know that there are teams with buys in week 6 at the very least, because I know that New Orleans with Michael Thomas, a lot of times we were thinking about Michael Thomas might be out until his bye, and that was week 6 for them. I'm not sure, however, if there are buys this week. Let's just count the games. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. There are 16 games in week 5. So there are no buys this week. The first week with buys is week 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So there'll be 2 teams on bye in week 6. So that is when they will start. And that is when, for those of you who may be off to a tougher start in some leagues, I think that the bye weeks start to give you opportunities, because if you have good depth and some of those teams that are doing well are only top-heavy teams in your leagues, then you have an opportunity to kind of turn your season around at that point. So the buys, the portion of the season with buys can make a big difference for you in your leagues, and it looks like that will start in week 6. Thank you for the chat. James Martin says, is Kareem Hunt an every week start? I find it hard-pressed that he's not. It depends on, of course, what you have at your running back spot, but I think that Kareem Hunt in your flex position every week seems to be pretty safe. Because of the fact that Cleveland is such a run-heavy team, I think the circumstances are going to have to be extreme for Hunt to not have the chance to at least give you a nice floor and potentially have some big games. Again, he outproduced Nick Chubb in terms of fantasy points again this week in a game where I think Cleveland is a good team, and I think they're going to run the ball a lot this year. I think they're going to have a lot of positive game scripts where they're going to be able to have the lead and be running the ball. That's good for both of those guys. And in the situation where they're not, he's your backfield pass catcher. So the floor seems real good for Hunt. It seems like there are only extreme circumstances where he's not going to have nice games. Now, of course, every player is not going to have big games every week, but I think it's very possible that Hunt is a guy that you can just trust at this week in your flex spot in terms of giving you a nice floor and potentially turning out nice games. I will review the Cleveland game next, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, James. So thank you for the chat, and we'll take a look at that more in a moment. Let me see from JAC here. No doubt Darnold better. I'd be surprised if he could maintain rushing success. I agree. 5 rush touchdowns in 4 games. Not trying to penalize him for success, but not likely rushes for touchdown every game. For sure. That's kind of like more when I looked at his stats there, I was more focusing on how consistent has he been in the pass game. He's been right around 300 yards every game, and Tannehill has been very up and down. In those games where Derrick Henry has those huge games, of course, it's easy to see where Tennessee doesn't need to turn to the pass game, and that's what could potentially lead to a little bit more of that roller coaster for Tannehill, whereas is it a more consistent amount of work in terms of his passing yards for Darnold? That was kind of why I looked at that. And you say JAC 5 rushes in the last 4 games. And this is, I see JAC, you are following up to Rob. I'm going to go back to Rob here. In that league, Calvin Ridley. Rob, you are answering who are your other receivers from JAC. Let me see what your previous one where you're dropping Marshall for Darnold. Calvin Ridley, Jamar Chase, Antonio Brown, Tim Patrick, Hunter Renfrow. I would feel fine about all of those receivers over Terrence Marshall at this point. At the very least, Ridley and Chase are your starters with a flex consideration between Brown and Patrick. So yeah, I think you're going to be fine to make that swap. I don't think that I think Terrence Marshall is a player that you can comfortably drop at this point, and I see JAC agrees with that for the pickup. So hope that helps you out there, Rob. Wish you the best on that. Before I go back to the content, let's put up this notification again for those of you that are watching and thinking about dropping a chat. Please feel free to do that. The chat is open all show. This is what we're here for, and we jump back and forth from our content to the chats. So feel free to jump in there and drop us a question, or even if you just want to tell us about how your season's going. And again, if you're watching on replay, feel free, to leave us a comment as well. Oh, and I also want to say a big thank you. I've mentioned this on a couple of previous streams. But as a relatively new channel, we are still growing, and we will say that we just passed that first YouTube milestone of 100 subscribers. So for all of you that have been with us through last season and this year, we thank you for being subscribers and helping us to reach that goal as we continue to grow. We look forward. We want to say again, if you're new to the stream, if you're watching for the first time, feel free, if you like our content, to hit that subscribe button. That way you can get those notifications when we do have new content. And also, if you want to drop us a like, the likes and the subscribes, they definitely help out the channel a ton. So we appreciate all of you that have been with us. And for those of you that are new, we are glad to have you along and look forward to having you on future streams. Rob says, thanks, guys. And Vansco says, much love. Of course, Vansco, one of our regulars, currently one of our leaders in the 6 picks game. We'll talk about that a little bit later more tonight. We haven't put together the standings yet after week 4. But we will be doing that once we work on the week 5 pick 6 choices for you. So if you haven't checked out that game, that is for you, the viewers, to play. It is on our channel. You can just take a look at one of the previous weeks, and it'll pretty much explain how to play it. It's pretty simple. You just picking 6 fantasy matchups. You'll definitely understand it. Get in there and see if you can knock Vansco off that leaderboard. All right, which game did I say I was going to review next? Because I know I just said I was going to review the Cleveland game, right? It's actually the next one up in line anyway. So perfect. Cleveland wins in a much lower scoring game than I expected. I will say I kind of thought this was going to be a higher scoring game than it ended up being, just because of the fact that Minnesota's been playing real well. But like I said, I think Cleveland is a good team. I think there's plenty of games, and their defense is looking pretty good at this point too, where they're playing with leads and able to run the ball quite well. Certainly not a huge pass day for the Browns, but not a lot of pass targets to be had out there either. Baker Mayfield just with 155 yards, 9-3. Kareem Hunt is who we were talking about. Hunt in this game with 16-6. He had 14 rushes for 69 with a touchdown, 4 targets, 2 catches, 17 yards. If we look at Hunt's numbers overall on the year, let's take a look between Hunt and Chubb. And obviously Chubb in this game, 11-7. I want to say this was the second straight game where Hunt had outproduced Nick Chubb. Right now in PPR, as I call up on my screen, currently it's just refreshing. Kareem Hunt is the RB7 for the year, and Nick Chubb is the RB12. They're a little closer in standard, which makes a ton of sense. But in terms of PPR, and I usually talk about everything in PPR because I assume that most players out there are playing PPR. So for the benefit of that, that's kind of what the reference point that I use. Obviously, there are different formats out there. You guys all know that. But Hunt, if you look at his production so far this year, in terms of carries, in order 6, 13, 10, 14. In terms of targets, in order 3, 1, 7, 4, and fantasy points 17, 6, 28, and 17. So 3 out of his 4 games in PPR, 17 or above, is certainly very worthy of feeling like you could trust this guy every week at this point. He has been, in terms of his finish each week, he has been in the top 16 3 of those 4 weeks, and 13th and 16th were 2 of those, and one of the weeks, which was last week, he was in second. So that's RB2 value. At that point for 3 out of the 4 weeks. And when you compare that to Nick Chubb, certainly I've liked Nick Chubb a whole lot. Chubb's fantasy points this year, 22, 17, 8, and 12. And he has been RB2 or better in just 2 of his 4 weeks. So of the 2, you could almost say that Kareem Hunt is kind of out-producing Nick Chubb at this point. I don't know if that will be the way that it goes the entire season. I would expect Chubb to have plenty of opportunity. But again, when you're talking about a run-first team, I think there is enough volume to go around for both of these guys. I don't feel like it's a situation where Nick Chubb's going to get it all and Hunt's going to end up shut out in some of these games. So I do feel like Hunt is a guy that you can continue to trust. And that doesn't even have to be my opinion. That's just strictly based on the data that we've seen so far. And that's how I like to look at things. Like I always would rather look to data than just my own opinion. For those of you that are regulars, you know that. We put up the matchups when we talk about who we want to play. And that's kind of the way I reference things is what kind of matchups do these guys have? What kind of volume are they seeing? Opinions are great, but I certainly don't feel like my opinion is the only one that's out there. So that's not, to me, nearly as valuable as actually looking at the stats. Based on the stats, I think it's definitely clear that Kareem Hunt is in there with the potential to help your team at this point, and you kind of got to trust those stats. So yes, in terms of the question, it does look like Kareem Hunt seems to be a player that you can certainly trust on an every week basis at this point. And in most situations, you're relying on him to be a flex player. So if he's returning RB2 value, then you're doing well for yourself. Looking at the other side of the ball here, Minnesota, Kirk Cousins have been playing great. A little bit of a down game for Cousins this week. 1 touchdown, 203 yards in the air. Despite that, Justin Jefferson still had a great game. 6 catches on 7 targets, 84 yards with a touchdown. Justin Jefferson, I feel like is going to continue to be a great player all year long. It was a disappointing game for Adam Thielen. Didn't hit him quite as big. 7-6, still had 9 targets, just didn't turn out as much production with those. And again, we talked a little bit about Dalvin Cook. Did they fully trust him this week back from injury? I don't know. We saw him get 9 rushes where Alexander Madison got 10. So clearly it was an even split. And this is not a team that seems to be an even split type team to me. It seems like Cook is going to get the bulk of that work most of the time. So I think it's very possible they were just not 100% sure that they liked his health this week. 6'4" for Dalvin Cook is way less than you expect from him. So we'll monitor, how he is moving forward, and we would expect him to get more of the work beyond this game. Tyler Conklin, player we talked about last week on the waiver wire, 6 targets in this game, which is still reasonably okay for the tight end spot, considering that Kirk Cousins only put up an 11-point day. Fantasy-wise, Conklin having 6 of those targets doesn't necessarily mean that I all of a sudden feel like he's no longer worth consideration to be a tight end streamer for that team. Just didn't happen to have that big of a game this week. We'll keep an eye on him as we move forward through the rest of that season. But again, a low-scoring game here, so tough to get the production that you want out of a lot of these guys. All right, next up in our rundown, we'll look at Indianapolis and Miami. Welcome back, Jonathan Taylor. So glad to see you again. This was a good situation for Indianapolis in terms of the matchup. Indianapolis wins this game 27-17, playing with the lead for most of it. Of course, that worked out well for Jonathan Taylor, 20.40, 103 yards on the ground with a touchdown, caught a couple of passes as well, 3 of them. Not so much for Nyheim Hines, but again, that's the situation we kind of thought it might be in this game. Nyheim Hines is going to return you some value, but it's going to end up being in games where they trail most of the time and they need his pass catching ability out of the backfield. That wasn't the situation here. So not a knock on him as a player or his fantasy value by any means, but just that's the way it is at this point. And you it's kind of difficult to guess on that. So that's kind of the situation that you're in if Hines is a player that you play a lot. Carson Wentz had 17-9-2, 2 touchdowns through the air. Pittman was the target leader in terms of pass catchers. 11-9 was his total on his 8 targets for 6 catches. Pascal with 8-4. And then we saw Mo Alley Cox with a very nice game at the tight end spot. Just 5 targets, 42 yards, but did have 2 touchdowns. Again, a little bit touchdown dependent there. Again, as you're looking at these graphics, remember that the yellow W next to the names does indicate that those are players that are currently on less than 50% of all rosters in these leagues. So not only are we reviewing these games, but we are just giving you a kind of a chance to take a look at who might be out there in your league if you're looking around to try to bolster your lineup. On the Miami side, as Vansco mentioned, disappointing for Myles Gaskin. We see 2 running backs ahead of him in terms of the workload. I don't know if they have lost faith in Gaskin at this point. Certainly, I felt like he had some potential to be the main guy in that backfield, and it's not going well. Malcolm Brown had the most rushes in this game. Of course, when playing from behind like Miami was, that's going to make a difference. But we did see Myles Gaskin seeing some targets out of the backfield. And so if he was going to still be trusted in that lineup for that team, you would have expected he would have gotten some of that this week, and he did not. In fact, there were very few targets out of the backfield at all. So not a good situation there. Devontae Parker was the leader, 10 targets, 4 catches, 77 yards, 1 touchdown, 17-7. Parker is a difficult player to predict. I've always felt that way. Jalen Waddle was 6'3", just 4 targets for Waddle. Another nice game from Mike Gesicki. 2 straight games in a row that he's played well since Jacoby Brissett took over there. That is certainly something worth mentioning, and I think that is a notable difference. We saw Mike Gesicki not really relevant with Tua Tagovailoa in the lineup there, and a big difference with Jacoby Brissett. So I believe there is something to that. If Gesicki is a player who you have on your roster and have been concerned about, it certainly looks like things are more in his favor at this point. 6 targets, 5 catches, 57 yards at a touchdown, 16-7. So that certainly makes a difference at your tight end spot. I think it's potentially a player you can start to trust quite a bit more than the way it seemed like that season was starting for Mike Gesicki. Next game up is Tennessee and the New York Jets. New York Jets get the win here, 27-24. Tennessee, of course, did not have Julio Jones or A.J. Brown. Hopefully they are back soon, not only because we would like to have some fantasy value out of them, but quite simply, Tennessee needs to figure out what's going on in their offense, and they're not going to do it with those guys sitting on the bench. So Ryan Tannehill, 18-9-4 in this game, 301 yards passing, 51 attempts with 1 touchdown. Derrick Henry, another great game, 25-7-0, 157 on the ground with a touchdown, 2 catches on his 2 targets. Even Jeremy McNichols was able to get in there as well, 18.6, 12 targets. 12 targets for McNichols, 8 catches, 74 yards. As far as the receivers that did play, they're all available. Not surprised. Josh Reynolds with the most targets. He had 9, 59 yards, 11-9. His total to lead the way there. And the tight end spot, it was Ferkser, who saw 5 targets at 5-3 for a fantasy total. On the Jets side of the ball, a little bit better day for Zach Wilson. 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, 18-7-6. Corey Davis. This was a nice matchup for Davis, and so if you went with him in your lineup this week, he returned you value, 21.10 fantasy points, 7 targets, 4 catches, 111 with a touchdown, and Jamison Crowder also with 19.5 on his 10 targets, 8 catches, 55 yards with a touchdown, and Keelan Cole got in there as well with 13.3. So a better game. Michael Carter had a touchdown there. I believe that was his first of the season. 36 yards on the ground, also had 1 catch on his 3 targets as well. So even Michael Carter got in there a little bit. Remains to be seen what happens there in that Jets situation the rest of the season. But a nice game fantasy-wise for a couple of those players there, so that was nice to see. All right, let me slide out of here and see what we got here in the chat. I do see another comment here. Let's scroll down. James Martin says, Zach Moss is looking good. I definitely agree on Zach Moss. In this way especially, the Buffalo run game is not necessarily a run game that I think I trust a whole lot because they're going to lean on the pass in most games. But the reason why I like Zach Moss over Singletary is because Zach Moss seems to be the guy that they trust around the goal line. Obviously, Josh Allen is going to get a lot of goal line looks in terms of rushing, but it does seem like Moss is the guy that's going to get those opportunities So between the two, that makes the difference in terms of which one you like better between Moss and Singletary. If he's going to be the one that's going to get those opportunities around the goal line. So I definitely think that there is some potential there. You saw both of them get some work this week. But I think that going forward, it does look good for Moss. The fact that they did bring in Matt Breida this year, it's not like they're trying to work all three of them. So at least, when you're talking about like a situation with Baltimore last year when you had three guys that were viable, it's tough. It makes it real tricky to kind of pick out who you're going to play. But I do think that makes Moss playable like in a flex type situation for a lot of these weeks. I like this matchup this past week. You'll see what happens moving forward with the next couple of matchups. Obviously, Kansas City up next week for Buffalo. So we see what happens there. We expect that this is a Kansas City game is more of a pass-heavy game for that team. But you never know. So obviously, as we look forward to next week, we keep an eye on those matchups in terms of what we do on a week-in, week-out basis. Thank you for the chat, James. Let me see what game is up here next here on our rundown. Let's see. We just did the Tennessee Jets game. Next up is Detroit and Chicago. So here are your numbers from that game. Chicago wins that game 24-14. Welcome back to the who's going to play quarterback Chicago Bears. Again, we have more press conferences for Matt Nagy saying that Andy Dalton is his starter. I don't know why that's even worth mentioning at this point, because if he's not healthy, why are you going out doing press conference talking about Andy Dalton unless you just want to detract from Justin Fields? Obviously, he played a little bit better this week, but still, 209 through the air, 11 of 17. It's not like he had a lot of pass opportunity in this game. I don't know. It's just weird. I have no idea. But nonetheless, David Montgomery had a nice game, 22-6. Before he left this game with injury. And that means that the player that you're keeping an eye on this week is Damian Williams for the Bears. This is once we talk about our waiver wire players. Tomorrow we will do our top 5 waiver wires. And again, this is why I put those little yellow W's on the screen. Damian Williams, if David Montgomery is out with injury, you certainly think that he is the guy that's going to end up getting all the volume there for the Bears. So at the very least, you're looking at a game of Damian Williams with Montgomery out. Should he not be able to play? I don't know that the reports that I've seen indicate that it's a real serious injury for Montgomery, but nonetheless, we never like to see anybody get hurt, but injuries do happen. And so that makes Williams a player to keep an eye on this week on your waiver wire. And I believe he will be picked up in many of them. So this is something we want to keep an eye on. He did have a nice day, 15 points in this game. 8 rushes, 55 yards with a touchdown. He also had 2 targets, caught both of those for 15 yards. So keep an eye on the reports on Montgomery as you look towards your waivers for this week. Player to watch there for Detroit. Darnell Mooney led all wide receivers at 18-5, and the unfortunate struggles of Allen Robinson continue this year. 9-3 for Robinson, only 3 targets in this game. Mooney did have 7 targets. Again, Justin Fields only threw the ball 17 times. If they are not going to throw the ball with Fields, that doesn't bode well for Robinson. And if it's not Fields playing, it's Andy Dalton. And we saw what the pass catchers did in Dallas last year with Andy Dalton in there for a while. It's not a good situation for Robinson. At the very least, I don't think you could play him at this point in your lineups. And at the worst, you're looking for a situation where you can get away from him somehow. I don't know if he's droppable at this point, but if you could somehow get rid of Robinson on a trade. Is he a buy low potential at this point? I guess he could be a buy low if you're looking to, if you feel like he can turn it around later on in the season. But nonetheless, it's a struggle right now for Robinson, and nobody wants to see that, especially if you have him on your roster. On the Detroit side, for the players that you potentially were playing this week, not a lot of great stuff there. DeAndre Swift at 9-2, TJ Hawkinson at 8-2, and Jamal Williams at 6-6. Hawkinson did have 9 targets still. Just only had the 42 yards. It was Khalif Raymond who was the leader there. 7 targets, 3 catches, had 2 touchdowns, 19-6. Player that's probably out there on your waiver wire if you're looking around right now. Amon, I can't say this is. I don't think I've said this name on these streams before. So sometimes if I'm saying right, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think I'm saying that right, but I might be saying it wrong. Who knows? 13 points for him, 8 targets there as well. Goff 299 with 2 touchdowns. Threw the ball 39 times in this game. It remains to be seen how that goes. But obviously, the guys that you have potentially been playing, you would look for a little bit more there out of a guy like Swift and also Hawkinson. Again, Chicago wins that game 24-14. All right, I do see a couple of chats here, so let me go ahead and back out of our graphics here and get back over to the chat side. And let's see where we left off here. Let's see. Rolando Fortanel is with us. Welcome, Rolando. You look familiar to me, so I believe you've been here before. Welcome back. Should I drop Brandon Ayuk for Cordero Patterson? And you say, or Edmonds is your other option. I think that if you are wanting to pick up Cordero Patterson, he's available on your waiver wire. At this point, he seems to have solidified his spot in that offense. It was, in terms of what he's done in past seasons, it was questionable for a while until we saw it for sure. I think it's pretty now for sure at this point. So if he's still available on your team off that waiver wire, certainly I think it's a player you got to go off and get. If you're picking between Ayuk and Edmonds, and those are your last two to possibly drop, I don't think I could drop Chase Edmonds. He's been very consistent production-wise this year. Brandon Ayuk has not. And even in this last game, he's been back long enough now that I would have felt like he would have worked his way in a little bit more than he has. I think of those two, Ayuk is, yes, your drop for Patterson. And I'd certainly think that Patterson is a guy, if he's available on your waiver wire like he is for you, Orlando, I think you have to get him at this point. So, of course, it's tough to drop someone like Brandon Ayuk, who you've drafted fairly high, most likely in your league. But when you look at those options and what is out there for you right now, I think that's a must situation that you've got to go out there and try to get Patterson. And so, yes, between those two players, I keep Chase Edmonds for sure. And I think that Ayuk is a drop for you. Unless there's some other way that you can get around it to keep them both. Hopefully Brandon Ayuk turns it around, but right now we haven't seen it. So I think you do make that move. James Barton agrees and says that he would do that. And he says Allen Robinson has been no good for him. And I am right there with you. That's very tough. And Rolando, you say you think you're giving up on Ayuk. I think it's hard to trust him. You certainly aren't going to be playing him at this point, most likely. So that being said, this is what happens with the waiver wire. If there's somebody that you're not playing and you've got someone who has a reasonable chance to give you production, let's see what you said here as a follow-up. I meant drop Ayuk for Edmonds. Oh, okay. You're thinking of which one you want to pick up. Well, that's a whole lot different. And you say you're also not liking Damian Harris. The thing is that without James White, you would expect Damian Harris to be in line for most of the volume for New England. Now, it was Brandon Bolden this week who was the higher producer out of the two. I don't know if that continues for New England or not. This was a little bit of a weird game with the weather situation there, and of course with all the things surrounding it with Brady back in town. But in terms of these two, they are, to me, both very viable at this point. I'm going to look up some numbers. I looked up Chase Edmonds' numbers on one of the previous live streams, and he has been extremely consistent at this point. Let's see where he falls. Chase Edmonds is currently RB 11. Now, that being said, Patterson is 2. So in terms of where they're simply at, what they've done, Patterson is the guy that's ahead of those two. We look at Edmonds first. His fantasy points in 4 games, 15, 13, 15, 18. When you see that sort of consistency, that's something that you certainly want on your team. His workload has been obviously between him and James Conner. He's the guy that's going to be the pass catcher there out of the backfield. And when you look at his targets in the 4 games, 4, 5, 8, and 5. So especially if you're playing at PPR, you feel good about that consistent level and the consistent fantasy points he's given you. In terms of his finish, 17, 20, 24, 13. So he's been an RB2 or better in all 4 of those weeks. Now, yes, he hasn't had the huge weeks, but he has given you the consistency. Definitely a viable pickup. If you have the choice between Edmonds and Patterson, I don't see how you go Edmonds over Patterson at this point. Fantasy point wise, for some reason, they don't have total for him for the first game. They do have numbers, though, 54 rush yards and 13 receiving yards, plus 2 catches. So that's 5, 4, 6, 7. That's about 8, 7 the first week. But after that, 24 in week 2, 16 in week 3, and of course 35 this past week with a huge game against Washington. And in terms of his finish, 4, 19, and 1. So he has also been RB2 in 3 out of his 4 games. And not only that, but a number 4 and a number 1 in 2 out of 3 weeks is pretty solid and pretty stellar. So I think without bringing any of the opinion into it, I think just based on stats, it's probably Patterson that you have to go out and try to get at this point. Perhaps you have the number 1 waiver wire priority. Then you know you're going to get that guy if you're playing in a priority league. But if not, then I would put a waiver claim in for both of them. cutting the same guy for both of them. And that way, if your first choice is Patterson, then it's a Patterson cut Ayuk. And your second waiver would be Edmonds cutting Ayuk. And that way, if you get the Patterson, then the other one just doesn't simply happen. You don't want to cut two different guys. So that would be what I would try to do in that situation, and then get whoever you can. And you say, let's see what you got here as a follow-up. Thank you. I will try to get Patterson. Not, as I always say, thank you guys for the chats. James Martin says, I think Edmonds is more proven, but it's a hard call. I do think that they are both very viable. And then James, you say Patterson is kind of, I think older is what you mean there. And then Rolando says, I thought of doing Damian Harris for Edmonds, but I don't know if it's a bad idea. So you were thinking about cutting Damian Harris as well for Chase Edmonds. I mean, it's not unreasonable. I'm looking for Harris. He's currently RB 38. So in terms of production for the season, he's certainly much farther down the list. And fantasy point wise, 12, 13, 3, 5. So the consistency has not been there that you've seen from Edmonds. Again, I would think about if you're in a league that uses, and I do see Aaron in your chat there. So as I always say, I do skip around a lot on these chats. If I ever do miss somebody, it's not on purpose. Just let me know that I missed you. But I'm just getting the follow-ups here. Rolando, what I would think you might want to try to do here is if you're definitely thinking about getting both, if you don't have the number one priority, there's a very good chance that if Cordero Patterson is on your waiver wire, whoever has number one is going to try to get them this week. And so if that's you, great, then you know who you're going to get. And then you could still think about doing Edmonds for Harris again as a second choice. Edmonds might also go before he gets back to you. But let's say you don't have number one. Again, I don't know. I'm just giving out thoughts on what the possibilities are. If you don't have number one, then I would definitely put in your first waiver claim for whichever is the guy that you prefer to get first, and whichever the guy that you prefer to cut first. And if that is Ayuk, then you're putting in a claim for Patterson cut Ayuk, and then a second waiver claim would be Edmonds cut Ayuk. And that way you are not potentially that way. Like I said, if you don't get Patterson, then you don't end up losing Harris. If you do waiver claim 1 as Patterson cut Ayuk and waiver claim 2 as Edmonds cut Harris, and then someone with a higher priority ends up with Patterson, now you've cut Harris and you're still having Ayuk. So again, most of you guys that are out there, I'm sure you probably know these, but these are just my little ways of thinking about how to use your waiver priority. And then if you decided that you still wanted to go after Edmonds, then you could put another claim in, Patterson being the first for Ayuk, Edmonds the second for Ayuk, and then another one that is Edmonds for Harris. And therefore, if you don't get Patterson, you end up getting Edmonds and you lose Ayuk. You don't lose Harris unless you get them both. And that way you're good in all those different situations. So I don't mean to use my hands as much as that, but yeah, that would be my suggestion, is to stagger your waivers so that you can have the best options, the best opportunity to get each one of those guys that you want to get. Prioritize them based on which guys you want the most. And you say, let's see what you say here as a follow-up here. If I do a claim and it doesn't go, the player gets cut anyway. No. What happens is, let's say, for instance, just randomly, let's say you have, if you're playing in a league that uses a waiver priority, let's say you have priority number 5 right now, okay? So the players who have 1 through 4, they're going to get the first pick in that order. If one of those players, if you put a claim in for Cordero Patterson, and the player that has number 1 also puts a claim in for Cordero Patterson, they're going to get them, and whatever claim you put in is simply like it doesn't exist. So if your claim is to pick up Patterson and cut Ayuk, then as soon as that person with 1 gets that claim for Patterson, that claim that you made simply doesn't exist. So nothing happens to your Ayuk. But then what happens next is it's going to cycle through to the next player that you're trying to pick up that is still available. So at this point, Patterson is gone because someone has taken him. But let's say you have 5. Patterson goes to the guy that has 1, but the people at 2, 3, and 4, they don't put a claim in for Edmonds, and you do at 5. That means you're the first person that gets a shot at Edmonds. So now, because your first claim is like it didn't exist, you haven't cut Ayuk at all yet. So now your next claim should also be Edmonds cutting Ayuk, because that way, if Ayuk is the guy that you definitely want to cut, you can't get Patterson because he's gone, but you can still get Edmonds, and that's the guy you want to cut. So that claim happens. If one of those people with 2, 3, or 4, if they also put a claim in for Edmonds, so now let's say you're 5, I don't know where you are, but just guessing if you're 5, whatever, just saying hypothetically. And the guy that has 1 takes Patterson, and the guy that has 2 takes Edmonds. then you've put a claim in for both of them. They simply don't exist. So you haven't cut Ayuk, you haven't cut anybody. You still have all the same players that you want. And that's the reason why you stagger those waivers. Because that way, if a Patterson goes, which you expect that he might, because he's going to be a popular player this week, if he goes before you, you don't lose anybody. And by putting in that second claim that cuts the same person, you make sure that you are only cutting one person. If it gets to you, then you get your Edmonds and you cut Ayuk. Now, like I said, if you decide that you want to try to get both Patterson and Ayuk, then the way to stagger those claims is your first claim should be for Patterson cutting Ayuk. Your second claim should be for Edmonds cutting Ayuk. And that way, if you don't get Patterson, the player you want to cut is Ayuk. That's the one that they're going to use first. Then you could put another claim in after that for Edmonds cutting Harris if you decided you want to try to get them both. And then what would happen is if nobody ahead of you in the order takes Patterson, then you're going to get Patterson, you're going to lose Ayuk. And then it's going to go through the rest of your 10 teams or 12 teams, whatever the case may be, until it gets back to you. If it gets back around to you and nobody has picked up Edmonds, then it's going to look at that claim next. And if he's available still, you'll get him and you will lose Harris, right? So there's a chance that you can get them both. I think those two players are going to be very valued this week. So I would guess that it's not likely to get both. And that's why you want to stagger them, because then it gives you at least a chance to get one of them and prioritize the player you want to cut by making each of your first two claims cutting the same person. And that way you don't lose somebody else that you want. So if Harris is somebody that you would like to keep, if you only get to make one move, then that ensures that the guy you want to cut happens first. So I hope that makes some sense the way I put it. But yeah, that would be the way I would stagger them. Claim one would be Patterson for Ayuk, cutting I shouldn't say for, it's not a trade. Add Patterson, cut Ayuk. Claim two would be add Edmonds, cut Ayuk. And then if you want to try to get them both, then you would make a third claim. And then next claim would be add Edmonds, cut whoever. It could be Harris, it could be somebody else. But if Harris is the guy, then it's going to continue to cycle through, and you're going to get some of those, or you're going to get none of those. But you're not going to lose those. You're not going to lose either of those guys if your claim doesn't go through to you, if somebody takes them before you. So you'll still have your roster exactly as it was. So I hope that makes some sense, Rolando. I know it's kind of a long-winded explanation, but that is the way I would attack that this week if you're looking to try to make those moves for your team. Hope that helps you out there, and best of luck to you to get those guys that can crush it for you moving forward. All right, I'm going to jump back in line here, and Rolando, you say I understand now. Thank you. I've never done a multiple waiver claim, but I get it now. Yep, that's exactly how it works, and I'm glad that it helped you out. You said it was very, very helpful, and I'm glad to hear that. So absolutely go out there, get those guys, improve your team, and keep moving your way on towards that fantasy league playoffs, or those fantasy league playoffs. English, it's only an option, I guess, at this point. Aaron is back with us, one of our regulars here. Aaron, you've been on our streams before. Glad to have you think. What do you think about Marvin Jones, you say, and how's it going? It's going all right. What do I think about Marvin Jones? I don't think Marvin Jones is necessarily I was about to say necessarily somebody that you can start at this point, but then I stopped myself because of the fact that without DJ Chark in that lineup, you would expect him to get some volume, a volume uptick over what he's had. And I think he's been playable. The situation in Jacksonville when it was Jones, Chark, and Chenault, I think it was going to be kind of a revolving door in terms of which guys got work each week. And there wasn't going to be very easy to predict which. Now that you've lost DJ Chark, I think that Marvin Jones, you would expect to see a little bit of an uptick in volume. However, this last week, he didn't really, I don't know how far into that game DJ Chark got hurt, but based on the fact that I don't think Chark had any targets, let me see if I can call that up over here. I didn't do normally review the Thursday night game on here, so I didn't do a graphic of the Thursday night game. Let's see. Chark is actually not even listed on here. I'm guessing that he went out early in that game. And if that's the case, and Marvin Jones only saw 3 targets after going out early, then that's a little bit concerning to me. It is good news for people who have James Robinson on their roster that he got so much more work, but has that impacted somehow Marvin Jones? Laviska Shenault had 7 targets. They simply didn't throw the ball as much this game. Only 17 of 24 for Trevor Lawrence. So I do think that Marvin Jones certainly has some potential for the remainder of the season. I don't think that Marvin Jones, by any means, just because he had a game that wasn't as great this week, is a player that you're thinking about cutting. But I don't know if he's necessarily a player that you're starting either at this point. I think he has value to you on your bench. I think he has value as an extra piece in a trade. If you need to make a trade a little bit more palatable to somebody that you're trying to move away, that you can add a Marvin Jones along with something else to try to get something done. So I don't think he's a player that is worthless. That's a little bit of a rough term. I shouldn't put it that way. That's a bad way to put it. I think he does have some value for your team. I just don't know if he has starting value at this point. If you're in a deeper league, or if you're hurting with injuries with the wide receivers, then I could see him being a flex starter on a spot start basis. But you still want to continue to monitor what's happening with that team, because, of course, it could turn around. It could just be that this week wasn't as good. He certainly has had some decent games so far this year. So I would keep him around on your bench and keeping an eye on what's going on. If you see things continue to go in the wrong direction and you need a player to cut, then he's going to be somebody that you can think about down the road. But I don't think he's cutting. He's a reasonable cut to think about right now. I hope that helps you out there, Aaron. I do see another follow-up on you that says here, Josh Jacobs or Jones for flex. To me, if you're talking on a rest of season basis, I think Josh Jones. Yes, combine them into one person. Josh Jacobs for sure to me, because what we've seen from Jacobs so far, really the concerns with him are his injury. Is his injury status? Wow, it's talking not going well tonight. His injury situation is the most concern to me for Jacobs. So since we saw Jacobs tonight back in the fold and seeming to be in a better situation, he got 14 carries for 42 yards. He had 5 targets, 5 catches. And for Josh Jacobs, somebody that hasn't been all that involved in the pass game in the long night, Aaron says long night. That's what happens on these Monday night games, especially when doing these reviews. I actually, as my other computer tries to go off over here, I was preparing a lot of these graphics while that game was going on. So, and I started the live stream basically whenever the graphics were all ready. So yeah, a little bit more of a struggle, but that happens. That's all right. I wanted to get this on the air so that people, either wanted to watch it live or wanted to watch it on a replay would be able to do that. Yeah, for sure. It's Josh Jacobs of these two, not only because of the fact that I feel like Josh Jacobs is a higher tier player, but also because I'm the type of player who likes to have a running back in my flex spot when possible. And I would probably favor that over a receiver most of the time, even in a PPR league, because I feel like you have a better chance of consistent production from the running back. Obviously, there are times when it's a wide receiver might disappear, if there is reason or if game script says that there is reason. So especially if your running back is able to get some targets out of the backfield, I feel like that gives you a more consistent level of production, and perhaps a better way to put it is most of the time a safer floor. And in your flex spot, I feel like you don't want to have somebody in there who throws up a stinker and ends up costing you a game. When you're only looking for at a flex spot, you're really only looking for a certain level of production. You're not expecting like a 40-point game out of your flex. And so for me, that's Josh Jacobs of these two. I think when given this choice for the rest of your season, I think you're going to choose Jacobs most of those times. Of course, there could be times when Marvin Jones has a great matchup. We talk about that a lot on our streams where we talk about the matchups and making those decisions. But I think the majority of the time between these two players, you're going to end up with Jacobs as that guy in your flex. So yeah, I do like that. And if you're in a situation where he is at that level for your team, then you probably have good depth at your running back spot. And Jacobs, if he's your flex and not your RB2, then I feel good about your potential moving forward once Jacobs is healthy in terms of your future matchups. So hope that helps you out there, Aaron. Wish you best of luck. And as I always say, whichever guy that you end up going with there, hope they crush it for you. Vansco back with us. Vansco says, I'm going to need to figure something out in one league or else I'll be rolling with Patterson and Hines. I think rolling with Patterson, certainly nothing wrong with that at this point. As an RB1 and RB2. I don't think CMC will be back, not starting Gaskin. CMC, the reports that I thought that I heard this week was that he's going to try to practice this week. It does seem like they've been more optimistic about him in the past in terms of his return from his injuries than it has actually happened. So originally, I think they thought it was a 2-week injury. So let's say you tack on one more week on top of that. That's not what you want if you have CMC. But Vansco, I will say this. Go out there and check your waiver wire this week for Damian Harris from Chicago and back yourself up. with Harris if you have a spot on your bench. And then if David Montgomery does not play this week, which it does seem like there's a very good chance that he doesn't, I think Damian Harris gets all of the work there for Chicago. And also, I think he is very likely a player that might not be, except for those of you who are out there doing your homework, he might not be noticed this week. He might kind of fly under the radar just a little bit in terms of waivers. So your people with the higher priorities, if you aren't one of them, may not kind of realize that, oh, David Montgomery was hurt, because Montgomery had a great game. And so that's not like, alarm bells are not going off that here's this running back that might be injured. I would suggest going out there looking for Damian Williams. And at the very least, if Montgomery misses one game and you need to get through 1 week with your running back situation, now you have a chance to start a guy who is going to be expected to get all the volume over a guy like Hines, who we know can have some good games, but also can be having some not so great games. So Dansko, you follow up and say he's available. I'll be going for him. I would suggest that for sure. I think that he is going to be a popular pickup this week, but I also do think that not everybody is going to realize that there was an injury situation that happened there. And so that's why we do our homework. Again, we don't ever want to see anybody get injured, but they do happen. And so I always say that for those of you guys, if you are out there actively looking for live streams on YouTube, you are doing your homework, you're a savvy player, and you may find these people when other people don't. So that would be my thought for you, Vansko. Hope that works out for you there. Aaron, you jump back in and says, would Chuba be a good play over Jonathan Taylor, Edmonds, or Jacobs, or just stash him this week? I very nearly started Chuba over Jonathan Taylor in one of my leagues this past week. Very nearly did. I didn't. And I'm glad that I didn't, but I did start Chuba in a whole lot of places. I expected him to have a better game than he ended up having. Let me take a look at his matchup for this week, because I can't say I'm entirely sure about what his outlook is for this week. I had high hopes for him. I really thought that his value in that offense was to be productive. Let's see, Hubbard. Let's see what we got for this week. Philadelphia this week, and Philadelphia is in the green, and it says Philly gives up the 9th most fantasy points to the running back position. So giving up 9th most to the running back spot is a good news for Chuba Hubbard. I don't think he's a starter over Jonathan Taylor at this point. I mean, I was very concerned about Taylor going into this week, but that's like a whew. Like, I'm so glad to see him actually have a nice week, because now I feel a little bit better about the fact that he's going to be a player that most likely is never coming out of your lineup. He was getting to a point where that was not necessarily a consideration anymore. So I don't think you start Chuba over Jonathan Taylor. I do think that Edmonds and Jacobs are in play for someone that you would start a Chuba Hubbard over. Edmonds has been very consistent. Jacobs coming back from injury, you would expect is going to get most of the work. Let's see, without looking at the actual matchups, this is probably going to be a matchup play for you. Let me see if I can get back here and take a look at those other two matchups. I don't have a graphic. I haven't done my graphics yet for the fantasy points allowed for each team this year, simply because of the fact that the games just ended. And why won't my computer actually cooperate with me at this point? There we go. Sometimes I have so many windows open during these live streams. I hope it isn't getting choppy while I'm clicking around here. But I'm trying to find out what we're looking at in terms of matchups for these guys. Edmonds this week for Arizona. They're home against San Francisco. This is not going to be the newest numbers, but I can put them up here for reference anyways. Here are the fantasy points to running backs. That was before. These are before this week. These are not updated after this week, so they are not the most current. I will look up the most current on my other screen while we're doing this. But going into this week, San Francisco was, let's see on the left side of your screen, 8th most fantasy points to the running back spot. So that is not awful. Josh Jacobs for Las Vegas. They are home against Chicago, and Chicago was 18th. So again, these are where we're at based on last week. Philadelphia, you see, let's see, they were in 12th, and now they're up to 9th. Let me see if I can call up the updated. So it's San Francisco is the one that I said that we're looking for. Let's see, San Francisco is for Edmonds, and Jacobs is against Chicago. So it's San Francisco and Chicago. Let's see what we got. And again, these stats are all available out there. I'm not looking at any secret places. Like, I'm literally looking on Yahoo, where I get a lot of these stats right off of Yahoo, just looking through the different options that are available. I just turn them into nice looking graphics to go on the screen. Or I hope they're nice looking. I try to make them nice looking. It's nice looking. So let's see. We are talking about San Francisco is currently 7th now. So they're up to 7th most fantasy points for the running back spot. So that's your Edmonds matchup. And then Chicago is currently in, let's see, 20th. So they have gone a little bit the other way. So those are your matchups. And then as we talked about Chuba Hubbard for Carolina against Philadelphia, Philadelphia is currently 9th. So the best matchup out of the three is actually Edmonds. However, Chuba, you would not expect to be splitting his volume. You would expect him to get all of it, whereas Edmonds, of course, is going to be splitting his with James Conner. So let's take a look at what Chuba Hubbard did this last week in terms of volume. 13 carries for 57 yards, 2 targets, had both of those catches. And if we compare that to Freeman, who is the other guy in that backfield, I have to scroll quite a ways down to find Royce Freeman because he hasn't done much this year. But I'm going to try to at least give you an idea of what the split was in that backfield this last week. I might not even find him. It's a lot easier to find people when you're not in the middle of a live stream. There he is, Royce Freeman. Perfect. Royce Freeman this past week had 3 carries, no targets. So, yeah, Chuba's the guy in that backfield, assuming that McCaffrey doesn't play. So, again, that's the reason why when I talk about figuring out who to play, you talk about these 4 things: ability, volume, matchup, and game script in that order. The player who you expect to get the bulk of the volume is normally going to be the guy that you pick despite the matchup, unless there's a huge discrepancy. So if the matchup is pretty much the same for Edmonds, for Jake, easy for me to say, for Hubbard over Edmonds, then I think that Hubbard over Edmonds and over Jacobs is the Jacobs matchup is not nearly as good. I think Hubbard is a very fine start in that situation. I think at this point, for where you drafted him, I think he is a must start. Aaron, you follow up and you say, I started Chuba over Saquon, still won. Good that you still won. Somebody else, I don't remember who it was, on one of our live streams, I think it was yesterday, asked about who to play in their flex, and they had somebody else in there, and Saquon was one of their players. I don't know if it was you, Aaron, or not. It could have been you. I said, you got to have Saquon in your flex. So I don't know if it was you or not that said that, but for sure Saquon is looking like he's on his way back. And you said them splitting makes me upset, but both are heavily involved. Yeah, I do. I certainly think that I had higher hopes for Chuba Hubbard this week than what happened, but you expect that you don't think McCaffrey's going to be back this week. And even the next week, you keep your eye on the reports to see what happens. So I think there's still some potential for a guy like Chuba Hubbard, who you went out there and you picked up off the waiver wire, that he could return some value for you. And you said it might have been laughing, doubted Saquon and traded him this week for Taylor. Oh, okay. Well, hopefully Jonathan Taylor is back in the right direction. I know I was quite concerned, and I think that if you, the person who you traded with was probably concerned as well, which probably led to that trade happening. But you hope that Taylor continues to be going in the right direction for you. It was a little bit of a slow start. We certainly like to see that production more this week. Saquon does seem to be turning it around after coming back from injury to start the season. So we keep our eye on what happens through the rest of these. But I do think that Jonathan Taylor is a player that you probably have to start just based on how high his value and the level of tier player that he is. Good luck to you, Aaron. Hope those help you out. Hope you're in line for another nice week this week, and always glad to have you back on the stream as well. Let's kick back into our content here and go through the remainder of these games. Again, the live chat will stay open, so feel free to drop us a chat as we continue to go through, but let's go ahead and recap the rest of our week 4 games. I believe the last game we did was Detroit and Chicago, and that means next up is Washington and Atlanta on the recap. We see Washington winning that game, a rather high-scoring game, higher than I expected, considering the fact that Atlanta has not looked very good so far. A better game for Atlanta, just not a better game in the way that most fantasy players wanted it to be. Not saying anything against Cordell Patterson, but the player that most people are waiting for in Atlanta this year is Calvin Ridley. And come on, Calvin Ridley, like we expected you to be pushing the top 5 receivers for the year, and 15 fantasy points is okay, but we would love to see more than that. I know that's, I don't know if that's asking for too much. I would probably, based on what he did so far, 15 is not the worst. 14 targets for Ridley, 80 yards, no touchdowns. For whatever reason, Atlanta Falcons love Cordero Patterson. 5 catches on his 6 targets for 82 yards, 3 touchdowns, 6 rushes for 34 yards. Mike Davis had a touchdown this week. Good to see for those of you that are rostering Mike Davis this year. 10-6 for him. Nothing great, but at least got you a level of something if you were looking for him as like a flex play this week. Matt Ryan had a better week at 29.02. Unless you're in a 2-quarterback league, you probably are not playing Matt Ryan. And Kyle Pitts at the tight end spot, still not really living up to what the expectations might have been going into the season. But you look at the amount of targets he still had 9 targets. So despite the not having the production that you might want, the targets make you still feel okay about Kyle Pitts moving forward, considering the tight end spot is very difficult. And there are very few tight ends who are getting that level of targets to where they could start to return some value for you. So you don't feel great about Kyle Pitts, but you don't feel the worst either. He is a buy low for sure right now in terms of going out there and making trades. He just hasn't really shown it, but he also at the same time has potential because of that the workload. So I think he's definitely a buy low out there for those of you that are trying to find someone at the tight end spot. Perhaps you had a Logan Thomas and lost him to injury, or perhaps you had a Robert Tonyan who hasn't really been turning in the production for you. He's a guy to look for. Speaking of Logan Thomas on the Washington side, again, Taylor Heineke as a backup quarterback has been reasonably good. 290 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns. He certainly hasn't hurt your Terry McLaurin. Great game there for McLaurin. 30.30, 13 targets, 6 catches, 123 yards, 2 touchdowns. You love that if you have Terry McLaurin on your roster. Antonio Gibson had a decent game. Even though J.D. McKissick had the bigger fantasy producing game, Gibson was 15-3, had a touchdown on the ground and had a couple of catches as well in the pass game. McKissick, like a Nyheim Hines, is going to have some weeks, is going to have up and down season. But he did have 5 catches on his 5 targets with a touchdown, 44 yards. We did see Curtis Samuel return and get a little bit of work with 4 targets, caught all 4 of those balls. So we will see how he works into that offense there. And at the tight end spot, I don't know if you can predict if Ricky Seals-Jones ends up getting volume while Logan Thomas misses time or not. I don't know that that's someone you can trust and just expect that because Thomas is out that he's just going to slide right in and get that volume or not, but at least something to keep an eye on in that situation. All right, I see another chat here, so I'm going to slide out of this graphic here, and we will return to that after we check out these other chats here. And let's see what we got here. Vansco is here, and Vansco says, I feel the need to drop Gaskin. I just need to find the back that's worthy of rostering over someone I drafted in the 6th round. It's hard to drop those players, but 2 carries is terrible. I think at this point that if any fantasy player is not willing to drop Gaskin this week, I'm not sure what it would take to make them willing to. I would love to keep him on rosters, but when you work the waiver wire, you've got to drop somebody. And if you have a decent roster, I think you're going to be hard pressed to find somebody that you feel like is giving you less value at this point than a Myles Gaskin. So I think he's certainly a viable drop at this point. Now, you're not going to drop him for, like you said, you're not going to drop him for a nobody. But I don't know, how much choice you have. And the good news is, Vansco, is that I think that his value has been so little this year that if let's say you were to drop him for Williams this week, I don't know that he's a player that someone else is going to automatically pick up. So if Williams ends up being just a 1-week player and you decided that you wanted to go pick up Gaskin again after next week just to have him there, then you're probably going to have a shot at that, I would think. So, I certainly understand. I know I have Gaskin. I have Gaskin in a couple of spots myself, and I'm probably going to have to make that same sort of decision too. But you really can't. What are you going to do with a guy who's 3rd on his team in volume? I mean, that's not good. So I don't know. I don't know where that's going with him, but it's not going in the right direction. So I certainly understand that. Thank you for the chat, Vansco. Aaron says, love Pitts. I hope that things turn around for Kyle Pitts this year, for the people who drafted him. I did not draft him in any of my leagues this year, but I have already gone out and tried to figure out some offers for him. Again, I think he's a buy low candidate right now. If you have somebody that you do not want on your roster anymore, let's say like a Robert Woods or an Aaron Robinson, that might be that might have the possibility of Aaron. See, this is what I combined your name, Aaron, with Allen Robinson. I'll figure this thing out sometime. At any rate, there are players out there who could have some value to someone who's rostering Kyle Pitts. Like, let's say they're in a bad spot for wide receivers and a Robert Woods might look good to them in terms of thinking that he might turn it around. And for you having that Robert Woods right now, he is not in your lineup, but somebody else could use him in their lineup. Then that's a situation where you might be able to turn a Pitts and get him on your team and look for him to continue to improve as the season goes on. So some sort of situation like that, those are the things that I think it's worth looking for right now. And hoping that Atlanta offense continues to get better. And if that happens, based on the targets that Pitts is seeing, you could work your way into a nice player at your tight end spot. I think it's very much worth looking at right now. All right, so let's take a look at the, let's see. Thank you again, Aaron, for the chats. Let's go ahead and go to our next game in line in the Week 4 recap. We just talked about Washington, Atlanta. So the next game up is, speaking of Robert Woods, here is Arizona and Los Angeles. Oh, man, this is, for those of us who have Robert Woods in several spots, this is not going the way we wanted it to go. Arizona wins this game 37-20. Kyler Murray with another very nice game there. 2 touchdowns, 23-8-2. Probably not the ceiling game for him, but probably right around his floor. We're looking at Chase Edmonds, who we've talked about a whole bunch already. Edmonds and Conner both had very nice games. 13 rushes for Edmonds for 126 yards, 7 targets, 5 catches, 40 yards. A great game. 21.6 points without a touchdown. That's a really good game. James Conner, 18 rushes for 50 yards, had 2 touchdowns, 2 targets, 2 catches, 16. Of the 2, Conner is going to be the guy that you're going to expect to have more goal line chances, so he's probably going to turn into more touchdowns this year. And I think if you're the difference between these two probably means that James Conner is your choice in a standard league and Chase Edmonds is your choice in a PPR league. If you're ever choosing between these two players, that would be the way that I would look at it. AJ Green, very interesting. 17-7 leads the team in fantasy production, does not lead the team in targets. DeAndre Hopkins had 8, Green had 7. Just simply Hopkins didn't do as much with them as Green did. 67 yards and a touchdown for Green. Hopkins 76 yards without a touchdown. However, just the simple fact that Green is continuing to see that much usage in this offense, I think makes you look at him a little bit differently than you might have starting the season or during your drafts. He's probably out there for a waiver wire pickup at this point. Certainly, as you see the yellow dot next to him, that does mean that he is currently rostered in less than 50% of all leagues. I do use Yahoo for that stat, just so you guys know that as well. I know I use Yahoo because I do feel that probably most players are playing on Yahoo. That's certainly not the case for everybody. But again, at this point, it isn't like a 1-week thing for Green. So you're starting to think about, is this somebody you want to go out and take a look at for your roster? I think there's some possibilities there. I know Rondell Moore was an early favorite among a lot of people, but Green is seeing much more work in this offense than Moore is. So of those two people, it seems like Green might be the more valuable person to keep on your roster at this point. Max Williams at tight end, a nice game there. 5 targets, 5 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown. Tight end streamers. You always want to look at these guys. Max Williams could be a guy that might be on your radar at this point. On the Rams side of things, Stafford, another good game there. That should say 21.20, not 29.2, 29.02. Let's see. Did I get all of these wrong? Those are all wrong. Boy, that's 2 graphics. So disregard the numbers on the Rams side. The numbers on the Arizona side are correct. Again, as I said, I was building these graphics during the Monday night game tonight. So these things happen. This is live stream. So sometimes it doesn't all happen exactly the way you want. At any rate, I'll give you the actual numbers. Stafford was 21.20, and that was 280 yards, 2 touchdowns. Also had 30 rush yards. Van Jefferson, they are in the correct order. Van Jefferson was the leader among wide receivers in terms of points. 21.00 was his total. 6 catches on 6 targets, 90 yards with a touchdown. Robert Woods was second at 14.80, 6 targets, 4 catches, 48 yards with a touchdown. And Cooper Kupp, far and away the target leader, as he's been for most of the year. 14 targets, but he was 11.40 for points, 5 catches, 64 yards. Deshaun Jackson also had 3 targets as well. Tyler Higbee hit 7.60, not 9. 7 targets, 4 catches, 36 yards. And Darrell Henderson, boy, do I wish Darrell Henderson had 34.60 fantasy points. He did not. That would have been great. He did have the 17.5, still pretty good. 98 yards rushing, 6 targets, 5 catches, 27 yards. So good to see that it looks like the injury issues might not be there anymore for Darrell Henderson. And Sony Michel is on the list. He had negative 0.9, only had 3 rushes. So apparently they feel pretty good about Henderson. Again, all those stats are completely wrong. The waiver wire yellow dot is correct. The only person that's available on that side of the screen is Van Jefferson in less than 50% of all leagues. And at this point, the amount of usage that he's getting there has been at least equal to Robert Woods the whole way through. I don't know how you feel about Van Jefferson as a possible person to look at on the waiver wire, but he is out there and available. All right, let's get this graphic off the screen as fast as possible since it's not really very much correct at all. Let's get rid of that. I feel better now. All right, let's move back over to the chat. Let's see what we got here. Vansco, shield me from these stats. See, that's why I got them wrong. I put the wrong stats up there, Vansco, so that you would have, be able to look at it a lot different than it was. He said, I know Cup had a down day, but it wasn't that bad. Yes, sir. Stafford is a beast. He certainly has been playing well. Vansco, man, if Henderson had scored 34-6, I would have been a much happier man. I agree. I have Henderson in a couple of spots this year, but I am glad to see, hopefully, that the injury issue is not what it was before. And Aaron says, loves the Rams offense this year. I certainly think there will be better weeks than there was this past week. So, yeah, with the exception of Robert Woods, you will still look for good things. But for those of us that have Robert Woods, it is not what we had hoped. I will say that for sure. All right, let's move on to the next game in our lineup, and let's hope that I actually put the right numbers in this game. I surely hope so. This is going to be Seattle at San Francisco. Seattle does win this game 28-21. Some interesting developments in this one to look at. We'll look at the Seattle side of things first. And the first thing that really stands out here is what's going on in the backfield in Seattle. Chris Carson is a player who we've been able to trust quite a bit there, and I don't know what's happening here with the fact that all of a sudden Alex Collins is where he is, how and why. Carson with 13 rush attempts and Collins with 10. Carson with 1 target and Collins with boy, it's tough when they're both start with the same letter. Carson with 1 target, Collins with 2. I certainly hope this doesn't turn into a committee backfield because Chris Carson is a player who we've been able to trust and have expected to get the volume there. I know that I have Chris Carson in some spots this year and have had in past seasons as well. I don't like this development at all, as I'm sure you don't either if you are a person who has him on your roster. I don't see any way that Alex Collins is suddenly a person that you're going to roster in your leagues because I don't know how you can expect him to give you consistent value there. But nonetheless, in this game, it was Alex Collins with 15.80 and Carson with 4.10. Not good. Russell Wilson with a decent day, 22.56, 2 touchdowns, only had 149 yards through the air, but also added a touchdown on the ground. And in terms of the pass catchers there, it was DK Metcalf leading the way at 16.5, 4 catches on 8 targets, 65 yards and a touchdown. Freddie Swain pops in there in second with a touchdown on his 4 targets, and Tyler Lockett, 6.4. We saw some great games early on this year from Tyler Lockett, and now he's seen some not so great games as well. I think that just is the way it is for Tyler Lockett there. You have to kind of accept that if you're going to play him, that there's potential for big games, and there are also times when you just won't see it. That just seems to be the way it's kind of been for Lockett. Same kind of thing happened last year, I feel like. On the San Francisco side of things, there is, to me, a lot up in the air. There's so much up in the air. It seems like every week with San Francisco. Now you're adding the Trey Lance thing into this. We already had a situation that we don't know what's happening in the backfield. Then we had the situation with the pass catchers, with Ayuk and whatnot. Now we've got the quarterback thing. It sounds like very reasonably Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't play this week. Trey Lance this past week with Garoppolo being hurt. Again, I did not see this game, so I don't know how early Garoppolo went out. But Lance was in there enough to have 19 pass attempts. Garoppolo had 23. So very reasonably, you can guess it was about half the game. Lance had 157 through the air with 2 touchdowns. He also added 41 on the ground on 7 rush attempts. Obviously, the offense looks different if Trey Lance is in there. And if this somehow turns into a situation where this injury opportunity means that Lance could be the every week starter after this, then just as there was with Justin Fields, there is some reason to consider trying to get Trey Lance on your roster if you have a spot before he turns into something really good, so that you make sure that you have him. That is a possibility that is out there. Looking around the rest of the offense, there was no Eli Mitchell this week, so Trey Sermon, you would have expected to get a good amount of volume. He did. 19 rush attempts, 89 yards, no touchdowns, 8.9. However, we did see, as we did before, Kyle Juszczyk continue to get a lot more usage than he typically would, I would think. I don't think it's wrong to say that. Juszczyk with 4 catches on 4 targets, 41 yards. So fantasy-wise, PPR-wise, nearly the same amount of production. I'm glad I have the right numbers on the screen this time. I'm happy to see that. The guy that was really good, that was really the top guy this week, again, Deebo Samuel has been great. 12 targets, 8 catches, 156 yards, 2 touchdowns. And as we look at the overall top players this week, Deebo Samuel was number 2 in terms of PPR behind Tyreek Hill. So obviously a great week there for Deebo. If you have him on your rosters, if you played him this week, then he returned some great value for you. In terms of, I listed George Kittle as the tight end there, although George Kittle was not the top fantasy points among tight ends on that team. It was actually Ross Dwelley this week. Ross Dwelley had 9.1, just 1 catch, 21 yards, but did have the touchdown. George Kittle, 12 targets, 4 catches, 40 yards. Again, George Kittle at this point hasn't had great games this year, but instead of looking at the fantasy total, you're looking at the targets. And 12 targets means that you continue to have confidence in Kittle. And it also means that perhaps there is a fantasy player out there who is frustrated with George Kittle and will gladly move him off of their team this week. If that's the case, again, this is the buy low situation that could improve your team moving forward. If you could find a deal that person will take for George Kittle, that's what we want to look for here. And certainly given what his production has been, with 12 targets, there is reason to believe that he still has plenty of potential to be closer to the George Kittle that we expect. So that makes him for sure a buy low candidate, in my opinion, out there right now, if you can go out there and get him. All right, I did it again, wrong order. I got to take the graphic off first before I slide the video. And anyways, back to the chat. Good thing this is a late night one. Let's see what we got here from Vansco. Hendo should have gotten a touchdown. McVay called some wild plays near the goal line. I did hear that Henderson had a touchdown opportunity that didn't happen. And then Vansco, you say Ayuk is going to sit on my roster all year, similar to Galladay last year. Yeah, Ayuk's going to – at some point Ayuk is going to be – you're going to start thinking about cutting him. I know I'm already thinking about it. I wish it wasn't that case, but it's like at this point, I don't know what else to think about, because I know there was injury concerns to start the year, but are we still thinking about that this is an injury thing? I don't think we are at this point. And if this does end up being a Trey Lance instead of Garoppolo, then you are going to see more quarterback runs. And that means, quite frankly, probably a little bit less targets to go around for everybody. And right now, the person that seems like is going to lose on that is Brandon Ayuk. So yeah, it's tough because he was drafted highly. He was drafted higher than Deebo Samuel. And, I assume in most drafts, everything that I saw was, Ayuk was the higher pick there. And it looks like it's going to be Samuel who is going to be the guy that you want, in terms of the pass catchers, for San Francisco this year. But the Trey Lance thing to me is extremely interesting. We'll see what happens there. All right, next game. Thank you, Vansco. Next game up here is going to be Pittsburgh and Green Bay. Actually, we already talked about Pittsburgh and Green Bay, so I'll just leave it up there for a second. We talked about that earlier because there was a chat question with that. And also, I do think that was that one of the games where I put the wrong numbers on the screen. Let me just take a look because now I'm curious. It might have been the other game where I put the wrong numbers on the screens. If that's the case, I'm going to immediately get it off the screen. Let's see, Pittsburgh. Yep, that's completely wrong. So look away, everybody. Next, Baltimore and Denver. Let's hope these are correct. It's one of those nights, sometimes these things happen. Baltimore and Denver. Baltimore gets this game 23-7. Lamar Jackson with 19-4, 316 through the air with a touchdown, 28 on the ground. The backfield situation is kind of shook up there a little bit. Tyson Williams was a healthy scratch this week, is what I heard. And Latavius Murray got 18 rush attempts. So interesting that I kind of expected Murray to be the guy that ended up getting the bulk of the work there at some point. So is that happening right now? It's quite possible. Le'Veon Bell also is up on that roster now, but he only had 4 attempts We'll see how he works in that. Patrick Ricard, 1 target. Probably not really a big factor there. It's probably Murray and Bell. Devontae Freeman is there. I don't see Devontae Freeman as being a big factor in this. I just think that of all the people that are there in that backfield right now, the one person who has been fantasy relevant recently is Latavius Murray. So I kind of felt like that was the way it was possibly going to shake out there as things continue to go along. He's a player, as you see with that W, he is rostered in under 50% of all leagues right now. So if you didn't get him earlier and we're not holding on to him, and hoping that things would go that way, then he may still be available for you. And sometimes running backs are hard to come by as you get further into the season. So it might be a player to look at there. Mark Andrews at the tight end spot, 8 targets. So a nice game there, 5 catches, 67 yards. Over on the other side, Teddy Bridgewater had more of the fantasy points, but he went out with injury. Drew Lock played in that game after Bridgewater got hurt. We saw nothing great in terms of pass catchers. Cortland Sutton, 7-7. That was 8 targets. Tim Patrick had 6 targets for 6.90, 39 yards there. And Kendall Hinton was in there with 2.3. Noah Fant, a very nice game at the tight end spot there. 10 targets, 6 catches, 46 yards, 1 touchdown, 16.60. Not sure if those targets were mostly when Drew Lock played, but that is something to keep an eye on. If Drew Lock continues to play, I can't say that I necessarily remember what the outlook was on Bridgewater's injury, but something to consider there because obviously, like we see in Miami, Mike Gesicki with Tua Tagovailoa really wasn't doing much. And all of a sudden with Jacoby Brissett, it's like, wow, Mike Gesicki. So something to keep an eye on. Javonte Williams between Gordon and Williams. Again, it was at least a fantasy point split, if nothing else. Williams, 8 rushes. Gordon, 9 rushes. Williams, 3 targets. Gordon, 4 targets. It's pretty much an even split. It's continuing to be that way. Even though there was some concern with Gordon being hurt this week, it still remains to be basically an even split. So kind of difficult to get either one of those guys into your lineup at this point. And the final game on our recap is, wait a minute. Tom Brady played at New England this week? I didn't know. Yes, Tom Brady played at New England this week. Tampa Bay and New England. Tampa Bay wins that game 19-17. Brady, not as big of a game as we've seen from him in the past few weeks. 269 passing, no touchdowns. It was Leonard Fournette who had a very nice game. 20 rush attempts, 91 yards, 6 targets, 3 catches, 47 yards. Ronald Jones only had 6 rush attempts. So it does seem, if this continues, that Leonard Fournette is emerging there over Ronald Jones. Not a big surprise, but at least makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. If you are someone who has Leonard Fournette on your roster, certainly don't feel that great if you have Ronald Jones. 12 targets for Mike Evans led the way in terms of targets. And Antonio Brown had 11, was second in line. Evans 14.5, 7 catches, 75 yards. Antonio Brown 13.3, 7 catches, 63 yards. And then at the tight end spot with no Rob Gronkowski, it was Cameron Brate. Did have 6 targets, didn't do a whole lot with him. 29 yards, 2 catches, 4.9 was the number there. On the New England side of the things, Mac Jones played a little better this week. 275 through the air, 2 touchdowns. Jacoby Myers had a decent game there. Saw 12 targets, so still clearly the target leader there in New England. 16.8 fantasy points, 70 yards on 8 catches, no touchdowns there. And you saw Bourne and Aguilar also working their way in there. At the tight end spot, I listed only one, and that was Hunter Henry. He was 13.20, 5 targets, 4 catches, 32 yards, and a touchdown. Jonnu Smith also had 10.40, 5 targets, 3 catches, 14 yards, and a touchdown. So a touchdown for each of those guys. The only touchdowns through the air that we saw. Brandon Bolden did have some work there out of the backfield. 6 targets, 6 catches, 51 yards. And Damian Harris, 4 rushes and 2 targets. So am I clearly seeing that right, that New England only ran the ball 5 times? It says Brandon Bolden had 1 rush attempt and Damian Harris had 4. J.J. Taylor had 1. So New England only ran the ball 6 times in this game. Could that be correct? Wow, that is interesting to say the least. Nonetheless, Damian Harris only 4.60. I don't feel like that's going to be the way it is every week, but it does seem like Brandon Bolden is the guy that they're looking to turn to now with James White unfortunately getting hurt as the pass catcher there. So again, you've got a situation where, you got 2 guys and you got to figure out which one to play on a week-to-week basis. Not always what you want. But that is the situation there. Hunter Henry, not he is less than 50% rostered as a tight end. And I also believe Jonnu Smith was less than 50% rostered, although I don't remember that for sure. Let me look that up really quick. I think that I saw that both of them were, and I was kind of a little bit surprised, somewhat surprised, but at the same time not, because I don't think anybody's really running out there to get guys that are going to split up the tight end work. I mean, that didn't work out great in the past with other teams. So Jonnu, I just kind of do want to see, where is he? Of course he doesn't. Like, my computer never wants to cooperate when I'm in the middle of a live stream and I actually need to look up information. Okay, I'll look up the name Smith instead. I'm sure there's less of those to go through than there is Jonnu's. Jonnu Smith is rostered 48%. So, yeah, he's also under 50%. So, hey, there's some guys out there, tight end spot. You know, you never know what you're going to end up with that situation, but at least they're there. There are some tight ends that are not really doing what we want them to at this point. So, might have to look at that situation. But nonetheless, that is the rundown of all the games. That was an important week 4 for some of us who are looking to work our way back in leagues, and some of us who are off to 3-0 starts are just continuing to crush it. And we'll see how that continues to go moving forward. We got a couple of chats here to go through before we call it a night, and I see one here from Aaron. And Aaron says, how do you feel about Miami's offense? I don't feel like I love playing anybody in the Miami offense if I don't have to at this point. The running back situation is a little bit of a mess right now. And in terms of the wide receivers, if you include, even including Mike Gesicki, I don't know how you would pick which guy is going to be the guy that gets the work. Like, I've never had much success predicting Devontae Parker in that offense. And I don't know if Jalen Waddle is all that. I don't have Jalen Waddle on any rosters or Parker of my own. So it's only what I've researched that tells me what's there. And just, I don't know. Nothing has shown me that I feel like I would have any more success predicting when these guys were going to have good games or when they were going to be very involved. If you look up Waddle's stats, which I'm doing right now, let me actually look them up on a different platform because this one is, I've already started looking them up now. So let's see what happens. Well, nothing's happening. So I'll just go over here instead. I know I can say for sure that I don't feel confident in Parker. Now Will Fuller is now out hurt again, so that's going to possibly mean an uptick for the other guys. But let's see where they fall on the list right now. Let's see. Waddle is currently 32nd among all wide receivers. Devontae Parker is currently 37th. Waddle's involvement in terms of targets has been this: 5, 8, 13, 4. Again, completely up and down. And then Parker's involvement has been this: 7, 9, 7, 9. At least Parker has been more consistent. His fantasy points 12, 9, 8, and 18. Again, you've had 2 different quarterbacks over the course of those. So how does that change things with Jacoby Brissett? I do feel like I would feel actually a little bit more comfortable with Brissett as the quarterback than with Tua. I was not comfortable with Tua at all. Gesicki was really up and down to start the year, and his targets have increased since Jacoby Brissett has been in there. Gesicki right now is currently tight end 11, and as soon as the screen opens up to tell me what his actual targets have been, I will bring those up. Targets for Gesicki: week 1, 3, 0 catches. Week 2, 6, 3 catches. Then 12 in week 3 with 10 catches, and then 6 last week with 5. And his fantasy points on a PPR basis have been 0, 17, 17. So who would I trust there? Probably Gesicki is a worthy start at this point. I don't know if I had Jalen Waddle or Devontae Parker, I don't know if I could talk myself into starting them on a given week. I think certainly based on matchups, it's a possibility. But I don't know that I feel that comfortable about that offense to start any of those guys other than Gesicki. Certainly not the running back spot right now. And unless you're in a 2-quarterback league, I'm sure you're not starting Jacoby Brissett. You say to follow up here, I just got offered Parker and Tannehill for A.J. Brown. That is an insta decline, in my opinion. There are many trades that you will get offered in fantasy football that are just like, you just look at them and you're like, what is this? Like, I don't know. I'm sure there are some leagues where players can just make trades that are just whatever and get them. But if you're playing in leagues that are somewhat competitive, I just don't think, like, in order to have to make good trades, you have to find a trade that actually helps your opponent's team also somehow. So, and you guys, you know this. I mean, if you're out here watching these live streams, you're doing your homework, you know this. But yeah, I don't know how this person that's in your league somehow thought that your team was going to benefit from losing an A.J. Brown and replacing them with Devontae Parker. And then I'm guessing, you know, Tannehill, you probably have a quarterback already. So why would you be playing Ryan Tannehill? Who could you possibly have that he's going to benefit your team more than? So this is just hey, I'm gonna make this deal just because. Yeah, that didn't help you out at all. So I don't blame you for hitting decline on that one. That's an auto decline. So yeah, I don't love that offense. I like their defense more than I like their offense. Their defense is looking to be very viable and most likely a defense that's not really rostered all that much. So I know that I have started to look for them again as a streaming defense, and I think I actually drafted them in one league and then cut them and might have even looked for them again in the same league. But I do think that defense has some potential there. You follow up with, I do have Tyreek and Marquise. Quarterback is Stafford. Yeah, so either way, like you're holding on to AJ Brown and waiting for him to get healthy, and then you're hoping that somehow you see things work out better there in Tennessee. It's a little bit insult to injury in that trade, actually, that person was trying to trade you Ryan Tannehill and have you trade away A.J. Brown, when the only real argument you could make there for Tannehill is the fact that you would have a stack with A.J. Brown if he was your quarterback, but then you wouldn't. So it just, that doesn't really, there's nothing there. I agree with you. At any rate, if you have Tyreek Hill, again, congratulations on your win this past week, because I would imagine that everybody that has Tyreek Hill won their matchups this week, and that is a good thing, unless you're playing against Tyreek Hill, which I was in a couple of spots, and that is not a good thing. It's not good when your opponent has 1,000 points against you. It's kind of tough to win those games. At any rate, thank you, Aaron, for the chat. Thank all you guys for being on the chat tonight. We had a nice night of chats and got you your full recap for week 4 as we look forward to week 5. Again, keep an eye out there as the waiver wires are in play now, coming up here on our Waiver Tuesday show. And do want to remind you before we end the stream tonight about our 6 picks game. And the new video for 6 picks for week 5 will be out soon. If you haven't played in our 6 picks game, check it out. You can take a look at the previous weeks. They're available on our channel just to kind of see how it works. But it's very simple. I'll put up the quick rundown of how it works. 6 fantasy matchups that occur in the same games. It's basically you pick out the player between the two who you feel will have the better fantasy scoring day using PPR scoring. There's no cost to play or anything like that. It's not like you're drafting a team. It's just very simple. You just pick out the winners to all 6 games, and we keep those standings all season long. Just gives you a chance to show off your fantasy football skills. Those picks, we keep those picks open until 1:00 each week on Sunday so that you can get in, and actually you're just going to make those picks right in the comments section on that video. They do have to be on that video in order for us to keep track of them. But it's really simple. Just something for you guys to enjoy playing along with. I know that one of the guys on our stream tonight, Vansco, has been in there. It is currently on our leaderboard through 3 weeks. We haven't updated that yet after the 4th week, but we will be doing that soon. We look forward to the next week's game of 6 picks. So if you want to get in there and get in on that game, go challenge those guys, get your name up there on that leaderboard. We'll look for that 6 picks video for week 5. That is going to do it for tonight's show. That has been our week 4 recap. Again, for those of you that have been with us, we appreciate it. And we look forward to see you on future live streams as well. Headed towards week 5 of fantasy football. Man, the season always starts going by so fast. But still a lot of good opportunity for you guys. If you're off to a good start, to keep it rolling, or if you're off to a little bit of a rough start, to turn it around, this is the opportunity to do so. So looking forward to another week 5. Week 4 is in the books, and we will move on and move forward. So as we always say, thanks for being with us this stream, and good luck in fantasy. We'll see you next time.